Chapter 1083. The ethereal celestial music had long since stopped, and the dancing men and women all stood with their hands clasped behind their backs. Nie Xiaoqian quickly walked to the side and knelt to the men and women high above. She respectfully and loudly shouted, "Your subjects congratulate Immortal Emperor and Immortal Empress on your wedding." She was the first to congratulate them, and the others just had to follow suit. However, to the thousands of sect leaders of the various sects, it was somewhat difficult for them to accept the words, "Your Majesty." Once they said it while kneeling, it was undoubtedly a sign that they were kneeling and bowing to the sect leader, completely submitting to him. However, before they could think too much about it, the palace lords of the 3,600 mountains of the immortal realm of bliss on both sides of the platform had already knelt down on one knee in front of the lofty men and women. The 24 protectors had already knelt down on one knee, the 6 commanders had knelt down on one knee, the 12 immortal monarchs had also knelt down on one knee. Under such tremendous pressure, many of the 1,000 sect leaders couldn't bear it any longer. Their knees buckled and they finally knelt. With someone taking the lead, the pressure was even greater for the others. Like a stone that set off 1,000 ripples, almost all of them knelt down one after the other. Although the few sect leaders who were ranked at the very top of the rankings had gloomy expressions on their faces, they had no choice but to slowly knelt down on one knee. Wang Qing stood straight and slowly swept his gaze across the countless experts of the immortal palace on either side of the stairs. Finally, his gaze met the cold and aloof gaze of the man high above. His eyes flickered and he slowly knelt down as well. Directly below the floating immortal palace, there was a large mirror projection projected by some kind of magic treasure, projecting everything that was happening in the golden world above everyone's heads. Even the voices that were being spoken could be heard clearly. Nearly 10,000 sect leaders of the immortal world all knelt down under the pressure. "Your subjects congratulate Immortal Emperor and Immortal Empress on your wedding. Your subjects congratulate Immortal Emperor and Immortal Empress on your wedding." Tens of thousands of people in the sky and on the ground shouted the same words in unison, and their voices echoed between heaven and earth for a long time. The momentum of unifying the world was concentrated on one person, and the woman beside him was the one who shared it. Jin Tai seemed to enjoy the feeling of having tens of thousands of people submit to him. He swept his gaze over the crowd for a long time before glancing at Ji Wu beside him. Today Ji Wu was very beautiful. She was wearing a dazzlingly gorgeous golden robe that accentuated her beautiful figure and exuded an indescribably noble aura. Her beauty was rare in the world. Her exquisite golden phoenix coronet was lifelike like a peacock spreading its tail. Her well-groomed eyebrows were like a phoenix spreading its wings. Her cold eyes stared straight ahead. Coupled with the serious indifference on her beautiful face, she had the aura of a motherly model of the world. If not me, who else could it be? Even Jin Tai, who was used to seeing beautiful women, was somewhat unwilling to move his eyes away from her face. He sighed in his heart that he really did not choose the wrong person. Only she was worthy to be his immortal empress, to share the world with him and be worshipped by tens of thousands of people. Jin Tai's gaze swept across the crowd once again, and finally landed on Nie Xiaoqian, who was kneeling on the ground and nodded slightly. Nie Xiaoqian quickly stood up and respectfully led the way for the immortal world's dragon and phoenix supremacy. A man and a woman slowly walked down the stairs. With every step they took, the golden phoenix coronet on Ji Wu's head would shake slightly, like a phoenix nodding its head, signaling to the tens of thousands of people who were worshipping it. Behind her, a golden phoenix tail skirt slid down the steps. At this time, everyone noticed that there was a man and a woman behind the two of them. Yi Shuejuan's black-silver robe had been replaced by a golden robe. His silver hair fell to his shoulders, and his face was tense and silent. He silently followed behind Ji Wu on the right. It looked like he was not attending a wedding but a funeral. Lu Yanqing also changed into a woman's golden dress and followed behind Jin Tai on the left. Her eyes were a bit dazed as she looked down. Not even in her wildest dreams did she think that she would come to the immortal palace one day. Moreover, she was standing behind immortal Emperor Jin Tai, looking down on all the heroes in the world. This feeling made her a bit dazzled. This feeling made her understand why so many women would disregard everything to pursue certain things, and why so many men would fight and kill each other for power. So this was the feeling of standing at the peak of power. Everything was under your feet. Among the kneeling crowd, many women showed envious eyes as they looked at Ji Wu, who was slowly accompanying Jin Tai. Wan Ling and Long Xiaojiu were no exception. At this moment Ji Wu really dazzled them. Beautiful. Noble. Accepting the worship of the world. If only they were the ones standing in that position. It was an irresistible fantasy for women. What surprised the two of them the most was that they actually saw Lu Yanqing standing behind Jin Tai, receiving the worship of the crowd. This made the two secretly look at each other because they already knew Lu Yanqing when they were in the World Commerce Association. Many men's eyes were on Yi Shuijun. They didn't expect the deposed immortal crocodile to appear in public again. Some of the 12 immortal monarchs kneeling on the steps had ugly expressions. In the magnificent immortal palace, a white-robed scholar slowly paced in front of the window-sill of the top floor, looking indifferently at the scene below. Suddenly he sneered, shook his head slightly and said to himself, "This guy just likes to put on this kind of scene. Who doesn't know that you are immortal Emperor Jin Tai? Why do you have to be so ostentatious? Do you think there are too few people who hate you?" Under Nie Xiaoqian's respectful guidance, the immortal emperor and immortal empress finally sat on the dragon and phoenix thrones in the center of the steps. Yi Shuijun and Lu Yanqing silently stood on either side of the thrones. Jin Tai calmly sat on his throne, glanced at Ji Wu who was sitting beside him with an expressionless face, and said with a dignified aura, "You may all rise." His tone was indifferent, but it clearly drilled into everyone's ears. It was completely the tone of an emperor. "Thank you, immortal emperor." Cheers reverberated in the sky and earth. Everyone stood up and returned to their positions. After kneeling for such a long time, although nothing could be seen on the surface, none of them felt comfortable in their hearts. "Wang Qing, I didn't expect your cultivation to have reached the late immortal emperor stage. Your progress is amazing." Jin Tai suddenly stared at Wang Qing and said lightly. Everyone heard this and stared at Jin Tai. Many people were a little surprised. In fact, some people with cultivation at Wan Bushing's level had already seen that Wang Qing's cultivation had broken through the intermediate immortal emperor stage. Before this they were still wondering if they could get past Jin Tai. They didn't expect that Jin Tai would directly say it before the wedding ceremony. Some sect leaders who were also intermediate immortal emperors couldn't help exchanging glances with each other. They felt sorry for Wang Qing in their hearts. Could it be that Jin Tai was so intolerant that he wanted to act up during his own wedding ceremony? Wang Qing, who was about to sit down, slowly stood up again. His silver mask was very eye-catching in this golden world. He had already prepared for the worst before coming, so he calmly clasped his hands at Jin Tai and said, "Thank you for your praise, immortal emperor. I can't accept your amazing progress in front of an immortal emperor." Jin Tai's eyes flickered as if he was saying that it's good that you know. He picked up the wine glass on the table and slightly raised it towards Ji Wu, who was beside him. Ji Wu expressionlessly picked up the wine glass on the table as if she was the husband's wife. "Everyone came from far away to congratulate me. I'm very pleased." Jin Tai and Ji Wu raised their cups and said, "Everyone, let's drink this cup." Chapter 1084. These courtesans did not attract anyone's attention. On the other side of the passageway that faced the immortal emperor and immortal empress, the densely packed golden-robed guards suddenly parted to create a path. Everyone's eyes turned to look at him. A bright red drum embroidered with gold rivets was carried over by a group of bare-chested men. The diameter of the drum was estimated to be 3 to 4 meters wide and 1 meter thick. This was not the most eye-catching thing. The most eye-catching thing was the person standing on top of the drum. A golden-robed man stood on top of it with a majestic aura. Everyone suddenly felt that the golden robe on this person's body gave them a feeling of fear and trepidation. They subconsciously looked at Kim Tai and then turned their heads to look back. The golden robe of the person standing on the drum was not the golden robe worn by ordinary people from the immortal palace. It was exactly the same as the golden robe worn by Jin Tai. The coiling dragon cloud sea that covered the robe, and the golden crown on this person's head. It could be said that other than the person's appearance, everything else was exactly the same as the immortal Emperor Jin Tai's attire. Wow! The crowd was in an uproar. The heads of the various sects, the people on the steps, and the people standing around were all shocked. They could not believe that there was such an arrogant person who dared to be so arrogant in front of the immortal Emperor Jin Tai. Wan Ling and Long Xiaojiu's mouths were wide open. Ji Wu, Yi Shuijun, and Lu Yanqing were stunned. Bai Qi, who was standing by the window of the immortal palace, almost choked to death. He was so shocked that his jaw almost dropped. He muttered to himself, "What is this kid trying to do?" This was the reaction of those who knew Yu Qianqiu. Not bad. The person standing on the drum was none other than Yu Qianqiu, who was pretending to be awesome. After a while, everyone gradually calmed down because they found that the immortal Emperor Jin Tai and the chief steward of the immortal palace, Nie Xiaoqian, did not seem to be moved by this person's treachery. Everyone came to a realization. It was just a show, but it was scary enough. At this moment Yu Qianqiu, who was standing on the drum and being carried over, pretended to be awe-inspiring as he scanned his surroundings. He asked himself in his heart and realized that even the pretentious actions of his 2 lifetimes combined couldn't compare to this one. Although he found the feeling of looking down on all living things, he couldn't help but smile bitterly in his heart. With this show, his wisdom in this lifetime could be considered to have been shattered to pieces, and he could never pick it up again. The drums suddenly became rhythmic. Under the accompaniment of the string music, a group of bare-chested men carried Yu Qianqiu on the drum like an emperor inspecting the world. When the drum was carried to the center of the passageway, a gentle and melodious string music permeated the cadence of the drum. Nearly 100 dancers wearing golden gauze clothes descended from the sky, surrounding a gorgeously dressed woman in the middle and blocking the front of the drum. They turned a blind eye to the drum and began to dance in front of it. Their dance was exquisite and elegant, like 100 blooming flowers. Everyone held their breath. Yu Qianqiu raised his foot and stepped on the drum. The drum was placed firmly in the center of the passage by those shirtless men. At the front there were dancers dancing like flowers. The woman in the middle was dancing to the front of the crowd. When she turned her head, she suddenly saw Yu Qianqiu standing on top of the drum. Her dance came to a halt, and her expression became infatuated, as if she had seen a lover she hadn't seen for a long time. Everyone held their breath and couldn't help but look back at Ji Wu, who was sitting next to the immortal Emperor Jin Tai. This woman's clothes were almost exactly the same as Ji Wu's. The only difference was that her clothes were lighter and more translucent. It was obviously for the convenience of dancing. The majestic Yu Qianqiu on the drum suddenly changed. He looked at the woman in front of him with a gentle gaze. 100 female dancers slowly pushed Ji Wu, who was dressed like Qingyang, towards the drum. At this time, Yu Qianqiu also jumped down from the drum. 100 bare-chested men rushed out from the side of the drum and slowly pushed him towards the other side. Gradually he, who was wearing the dragon robe, stopped when he was only a step away from her, who was wearing the phoenix coronet. Their eyes met, filled with tenderness and reluctance to part. Ho! Ho ho ho! The group of bare-chested men slightly swayed their upper bodies and chanted, as if they were encouraging Yu Qianqiu to do something. Under everyone's encouragement, Yu Qianqiu suddenly pulled Qingyang over and carried her by the waist. Then he turned around and walked towards the drum. The 100 men quickly ran back and used their shoulders to form a human bridge in front of the drum. Yu Qianqiu carried Qingyang and stepped on everyone's shoulders to walk back to the drum. Then he reluctantly put Qingyang down. The 100 bare-chested men and the 100 women quickly gathered around the drum and danced in pairs. In an instant the crowd was filled with emotions. The music changed again. The majestic tune became softer. Yu Qianqiu's eyes were filled with tenderness. He gently raised his hand and caressed Qingyang's cheek. Together with the music, he pitifully sang, captivating the fish and alighting the geese, overshadowing the moon and shaming the flowers, so beautiful that there's nowhere to hide. With her by my side it's like bathing in the spring sunshine. I'd rather die without regrets. Outstanding beauty and heavenly fragrance, let me entangle you even if life is short. You and I are willing, you and I are together, how fortunate we are to be a pair. The men who were dancing around the drum immediately followed the last note and sang to their partners, how fortunate we are to be a pair. Qingyang's amorous face immediately bloomed with endless shyness. She stepped back gracefully and danced on the surface of the drum. This dance was peerless, this dance was devastatingly beautiful. This dance blossomed with boundless beauty. This dance made the dancers around the drum pale in comparison. Every piece of her clothes fluttering in the wind was filled with love. Every stretch of her jade-like arms was filled with reluctance to part with Yu Qianqiu. Every time her toes danced on the surface of the drum, it was the sound of her lover's heartbeat. The crowd had never heard such an exciting song. No matter what kind of thoughts they had in their hearts before, everyone's emotions were fluctuating with the rhythm of the song. Qingyang's dancing level could be said to be unparalleled in the world. Every time she moved, it was like a mysterious black hole that swallowed everyone's gaze. According to Qingyang's original plan, Yu Qianqiu was supposed to sing and dance with her at the same time. However, no matter how brilliant the technique she taught him was, Yu Qianqiu, that blockhead, could not understand it even if he was beaten to death. Thus, Qingyang could only come up with this plan. She would dance alone, and Yu Qianqiu would only need to cooperate with her a little. However, what she didn't know was that Yu Qianqiu was not a blockhead. At that point he really did not have the courage to dance in front of the heroes of the world. Thus, he simply could not learn it even if he was beaten to death. The man dancing under the drum suddenly let out a resounding, "Hi!" Yu Qianqiu, who was silently following Qingyang's dancing footsteps, waved his hand and said, "Ah! Oh, wait for me to cup my hands in the mountains to please you. Tens of thousands of people will sing in unison for thousands of years to come. Look at the distant mountains smiling and the flowing waters flowing, for generations to come, the seas will dry up and the rocks will rot away." The domineering drum music suddenly turned gentle, and the 100 or so men joined in with a loud "hi" before hugging their nimble partners. The dancing of hundreds of flowers suddenly stopped, and only Qingyang was left dancing alone on the drum. She attracted everyone's attention, and in reality, everyone's eyes had never left her. Their eyes were already glued to her nimble dance. Yu Qianqiu, who was on the drum, did not lose out either. He reached out and wrapped his arms around Qingyang's soft waist. He looked at her and sang with deep emotion, "Ah, I'm drunk with you today. I can't let go of your beauty. Don't wait until your hair turns white before you regret it. I'm drunk with you today. I can't let go of your beauty. Let me hug the beauty back." The majestic drum music continued for a long time. Yu Qianqiu hugged Qingyang and looked at her with a faint smile. Qingyang's eyes were as soft as water, and her jade-like arms were already wrapped around Yu Qianqiu's neck. She buried her head in his shoulder, unwilling to part with him. The music was beautiful, and the dance was even more beautiful. The two's teamwork could be said to bring out the best in each other, and everyone was deeply immersed in it. No one knew who was the first to shout out and clap their hands in praise. "Good." In that instant, the thunderous applause pulled everyone back to reality. Jin Tai, who was sitting high up on the steps, was someone who rarely smiled. However, he couldn't help but reveal a smile on his face this time. He nodded his head slightly to express his praise and turned his head to look at Ji Wu. Ji Wu's eyes were filled with anger. She wasn't an idiot, and she knew that this song was obviously meant to flatter Jin Tai. It was meant to glorify the love between her and Jin Tai. If it was true, then it wouldn't matter. However, the two of them seemed to be united on the surface, but at heart they were divided. However, when she suppressed the anger in her heart, she couldn't help but bite her lips. She stared at Yu Qianqiu, who was still pretending to hug Qingyang, with a complicated expression on her face. There was one thing that even she couldn't deny. If this song was not meant to flatter, it was indeed a song that moved her heart. It was a pity that the male protagonist described in the song was not the person she liked. Such talent was used to flatter. Jiwoo was a little angry. If she knew this would happen, she wouldn't have encouraged Jin Tai to let Yu Qianqiu compose the song. At the same time, she had already decided to let Yu Qianqiu flatter her to his heart's content after this. Behind her, Yi Shuijun was also unhappy. He stared at Yu Qianqiu with a livid face. On the other side, Lu Yanqing's face was full of bitterness. Long Xiaojiu and Wan Ling, who were below the stage, were shocked. After coming to their senses, they kept staring at Yu Qianqiu in disbelief. Bai Qi, who was on the window of the Immortal Palace, shook his head repeatedly. Now everyone finally understood that the Immortal Emperor's decree to let Yu Qianqiu compose the song was not a whim. It meant that Yu Qianqiu really did have something up his sleeves. Just as the rhythm of the drum changed again, Yu Qianqiu sent Qingyang away and sang half a line of "Captivating the birds and alighting the geese." The expressions of all the experts present suddenly changed, and they turned their heads to look into the distance. 6 of the 24 protectors on the stage had already flashed away in an instant. They turned into streams of light and shot in the same direction. Boom! There was an explosion in the distance, and Yu Qianqiu's throat shrank. He could no longer sing. Chapter 1085. After a moment of chaos, the drumming also stopped. Yu Qianqiu, who was disguised as Jin Tai, and Qin Yang, who was disguised as Ji Wu, both stopped. The two of them, who were standing on top of the drum, turned their heads to look in the direction of the explosion in astonishment. The two of them were wearing eye-catching outfits, and they were truly a perfect couple. At this time, head steward Nie Xiaoqian, who was standing on the steps, was distracted for some reason. She looked at the two people on the big drum, and her eyes were not as cold as the head steward's, but more motherly love. Even the explosion in the distance didn't wake her up immediately. It wasn't until the man and woman stopped their performance that she suddenly woke up. "How dare you trespass into the blissful immortal realm, die!" A series of shouts came from afar, followed by a series of explosions. "You overestimate yourself." A cold snort sounded. Yu Qianqiu's expression changed. This voice was so familiar, it couldn't be? After the cold snort, a series of miserable screams rang out. The clouds in the distance changed drastically. The faces of the people of the Immortal Palace on the stand changed. The heads of the various sects looked at each other. The situation was very clear. Someone was trespassing into the blissful immortal realm, but they didn't know who it was. How dare they? Ji Wu, who was sitting on the phoenix seat, slightly tilted her head to look at the man beside her. The majestic Jin Tai's expression didn't change, but under his slender eyelids, his eyes were as cold as a knife. Chief Steward Nye Xiaoqian, who was standing below, immediately understood what was going on and said in a clear voice, "Since there are honored guests here to support the wedding of the Immortal Emperor and the Immortal Empress, why don't you all leave now? There's no need to stop them, let the honored guests come here." The shocking sound in the distance suddenly stopped. It was unknown how many people participated in the killing of the intruder, but judging from the sound there must be a lot of people. A stream of light quickly shot over. Before the people could see the appearance of the intruder clearly, a red cloud had already left the hand of the intruder. Wind and thunder surged and it quickly attacked the singing and dancing place below. The two people standing on the drum were shocked. Qingyang was an early-stage immortal emperor. She reacted quickly and grabbed Yu Qianqiu. The two of them quickly hid among the guards. Boom! Jin Ju transmitted his voice. The ground shook, and the drum was instantly blasted into pieces by the red cloud. Of the 200 or so dancers, those with high cultivation quickly dodged, while those with low cultivation suffered on the spot. The ground was a pool of blood, and in the midst of wailing, dozens of kabuki fell to the ground, twitching. However, this destructive power alone was not enough to cause any harm to the sect masters sitting on the two sides of the passageway. A mere stellar energy was enough to withstand the residual power of the explosion. Under the pressure of the gang qi, a large number of things fell from the two sides of the front row near the passage. There were fragments from the explosion of the drum and pieces of red cloth fluttering to the ground. Even though the power of the explosion was not great, the shock in everyone's hearts was indescribable. Someone dared to attack in front of Immortal Emperor Jin Tai in the Immortal Palace? Moreover, what day was this? The Immortal Emperor's wedding? Who dared to forcefully interrupt the Immortal Emperor's wedding? Who was this arrogant to such an extent? Was he not afraid of death? Everyone slowly raised their heads to look at the sky in indescribable shock. On the vast golden plaza, on the left and right sides of the Immortal Palace, there were two towering golden pillars that were tens of meters in diameter. The newcomer stood with his hands behind his back at the top of the towering golden mountain on the right. His skinny body was covered in a green robe. As the wind blew, the hem of the green robe fluttered in the wind. His eyes were bright and full of expression as he calmly scanned the area below. His gaze swept past Yu Qianqiu without stopping. He ignored everyone else and directly stared at the extremely eye-catching man sitting high up on the steps. Jin Tai only glanced at him indifferently. Then he leisurely closed his eyes. Light flickered in and out of his eyes. It was as if he did not care about the newcomer at all. His temperament was as steady as a mountain. As expected of the immortal emperor who had ruled the immortal world for so many years, he never lost the aura of an emperor. Sure enough, it was him. Yu Qianqiu, who was dragged into the crowd by Qingyang, looked at the person standing on the top of the immortal palace. The expression on his face was very interesting. He did not expect this person to come. He couldn't help but bitterly smile in his heart. Others might not know why the old man broke the drum as soon as he arrived, but how could he not know? With the old man's arrogance, it was obvious that he felt ashamed of his disciples' actions. But he didn't know if the old man came for him or if he knew that there was a show here and wanted to fight. Yu Qianqiu then looked around worriedly, especially at the large number of experts standing on the steps. He couldn't help but sigh in his heart again. The old man's style of doing things really couldn't be judged by ordinary people's thinking. He was too straightforward. Another dazzling appearance. In his dictionary the word low-key didn't seem to exist. The person who came was his master Bai Changchun. The originally leisurely white-robed scholar in front of the window of the immortal palace froze when he saw the person who came. His eyes immediately narrowed. Bai Qi didn't expect Bai Changchun to still be alive. He didn't expect Bai Changchun to be able to come out alive after being seriously injured by him and escaping into the forbidden area of the underworld. What's more, he didn't expect Bai Changchun to appear in front of him in this kind of situation. After carefully looking at the other party, he found that the other party's cultivation had already risen to the late immortal emperor stage. Bai Qi's pupils shrank and he coldly snorted in his heart. This person's cultivation had improved so quickly and he also had a grudge against him. This person couldn't be left alive. Emperor of the underworld Bai Qi's killing intent had already been ignited, and a faint killing intent had already gathered in his eyes. Lu Yanqing was naturally not unfamiliar with Bai Changchun. She thought that she had seen wrongly. Why would Bai Changchun appear in this place at this time? However, whether it was his appearance or demeanor, he was undoubtedly that person. Regardless of whether it was his bearing or demeanor, he did not lose the slightest bit of his former self. He was like a blade that had been unsheathed. The more he sharpened it, the sharper it became. He still did not hide his sharpness at all. Looking at Bai Changchun, who was at the peak of Huabiao, and now they met here, Lu Yanqing couldn't help but feel a lot of emotions, from the world's #1 expert who deterred the world, to the underworld royal palace in the underworld to challenge the emperor of the underworld, and now to the immortal emperor's wedding ceremony, where many experts gathered. This person's life was really amazing even for a woman like her. It was always so magnificent. He was like a raging great river, and no matter how strong the obstacles were, he would rather have the torrential waves overflow to the heavens, and he would continue to roll forward, break through everything and never stop. In the end, he would rush to the sea that belonged to him and no one could stop him. He was here. What would he do now that he was here? The haze on Air Shuajuan's face instantly dispersed, and his eyes bloomed with an inexplicable light of surprise, as if he saw the hope of breaking out of this hopeless situation. As soon as he turned around, he met Ji Wu's astonished gaze, and they both looked very surprised. Shijun, Ji Wu, and Lu Yanqing all turned to look at Yu Qianqiu, who was well-dressed and dressed like a dog. All three of them knew that Bai Changchun and Yu Qianqiu were master and disciple, and they all wondered if Bai Changchun's arrival had anything to do with Yu Qianqiu. Everyone present looked at immortal Emperor Jin Tai, who was sitting on the throne. Not only did someone disrupt the wedding ceremony, but he also killed the people of the immortal palace in front of him. This was tantamount to publicly slapping Jin Tai in the face. However, this person dared to make such a ruckus and come all the way here. Naturally, his ability was not to be underestimated. They didn't know how immortal Emperor Jin Tai would deal with this. Perhaps today's wedding ceremony would no longer go smoothly. At the same time, what made everyone curious was where this strong person came from. Why had they never seen him before? How dare he come here to make trouble? Jin Tai remained calm, but the chief steward, Nie Shaoqian, was angry. She didn't expect that she had ordered people to let him in, but the other party did not appreciate it. Instead, he caused trouble in public. How could everyone in the immortal palace put their face? She immediately shouted, "Who are you? How dare you act wildly here?" Bai Changchun. The man in the green robe on the top of the Huabiao replied lightly. His words echoed in this vast golden world. As soon as these words came out, everyone immediately thought of the person who challenged the emperor of the underworld, Bai Qi. They all showed a look of realization. It turned out to be that crazy person. They heard that he was injured by the emperor of the underworld and fled into the forbidden area of the underworld. They didn't expect him to still be alive. However, since he dared to challenge the emperor of the underworld, it was not surprising that he dared to cause trouble for the immortal emperor. However, the timing was really good. It was actually during the immortal emperor's wedding. Jin Tai's eyebrows slightly moved. He opened his half-closed eyes and suddenly stared at the man in the green robe on the top of the Huabiao. A person who could fight against Bai Qi without dying finally caught his attention. Nie Shaoqian was startled. She didn't expect that the person who broke in was that madman. She coldly snorted and said, "You escaped from the hands of the emperor of the underworld, but you don't know how to cherish it. Today will be the day of your death. This old man has nothing to do in this world. Life and death are nothing to me. Don't be so long-winded." Bai Changchun no longer paid attention to Nie Shaoqian. He faced Kinti's threatening gaze and lightly asked, "I heard that you're the strongest expert in the immortal world, a supreme monarch. Now it seems that you really have the bearing of an emperor. Jin Tai, there is no need to send others to death. Do you dare to fight me?" As soon as these words came out, everyone was speechless. This madman challenged the emperor of the underworld last time. This time he really came for the immortal emperor. Wang Qing, who was looking at the top of the Huabiao, slowly closed his eyes. He sighed slightly in his heart. It was not because he felt sorry for Bai Changchun, but because he was ashamed of his hesitation. Ever since he was defeated by Jin Tai, the shadow of defeat had been left in his heart. This time he came with the 6-dragon snow blue sword. However, after seeing the huge force of the immortal palace, he actually had the idea of waiting for the right moment to strike. This was completely different from the current Bai Changchun. Although he was defeated by the emperor of the underworld, there was no fear in his heart. He ignored life and death and brazenly challenged the immortal emperor Jin Tai. Just based on this point, he had already lost to the other party in terms of temperament. Chapter 1086. How dare you? How dare you? They were eager to show their loyalty but did not know the immensity of heaven and earth. A large group of people flew out from below, and in the blink of an eye, thousands of people jumped out. They were all frogs at the bottom of the well, thinking that they were the biggest nobodies in the immortal palace. Protecting the dignity of the immortal palace was secondary, and they wanted to take the opportunity to show their strength to their superiors. The sect leaders shook their heads secretly. Did they really think that the other party wouldn't dare to kill them in front of the immortal emperor? However, no one in the entire immortal palace, from Grand Elder Jin to the experts below, said anything to stop Bai Changchun. Obviously they wanted these people to test Bai Changchun's strength. Seeing so many people rushing over recklessly, Bai Changchun was not a soft-hearted person. He immediately snorted coldly, "Grand Elder Jin, I overestimated you. You actually sent these ignorant pawns to their deaths." His green robe that was fluttering in the wind suddenly froze and slowly drooped down. His right hand, which was behind his back, was raised in front of his chest. His 5 fingers formed the shape of a flower, and a light ball the size of an egg spun rapidly. As the spinning light ball grew larger and larger, the thousands of golden-robed guards felt that something was wrong before they could make a move. They saw that with the light ball in Bai Changchun's palm as the center, the airflow between heaven and earth from all directions was rapidly gathering toward the light ball. These people in the air immediately felt as if they were in a hurricane, and they were forcibly sucked in by the strong airflow. In fact, not only them, even the immortal palace guards with shallow cultivation in the square below could not stand still. They felt as if they were about to be swept away by the airflow. At this time, a strange phenomenon appeared in the air. The thousands of people who were originally rushing to attack Bai Changchun had now changed their direction and were desperately flying away in the strong wind, trying to escape the strong suction of the strong wind. Their movements were abnormally strenuous and slow. What kind of spell was this? The experts all around stared at the light ball in Bai Changchun's hand that had become larger. Those who had seen Bai Changchun use the lost immortal finger looked worriedly at the people in the air who wanted to escape but could not do so after a long time. At this time, the originally solemn wedding ceremony became abnormally chaotic under the strong airflow. Nie Xiaoqian's expression changed slightly. If so many people from the immortal palace were to die at the wedding, how could the immortal palace bear it? One had to admit that those who were eager to show off had made the right bet. Although their lives were worthless to the immortal palace would not sit back and watch them get into trouble on such an occasion. Nie Xiaoqian glared at the 6 people standing below and shouted, "Where are the law enforcement team? Capture this madman alive or dead." Among the 6 commanders standing below, Gao, who was in charge of the law enforcement team of the immortal palace, quickly walked down a flight of stairs. He waved his hand and pointed at Bai Changchun, who was standing on the platform, and shouted with a solemn expression, "Law enforcement team, kill without mercy." As soon as he gave the order, countless streams of light flashed from all directions. Gao himself took the lead and charged toward Bai Changchun. "Good." Bai Changchun shouted decisively. It was as if he had no interest in dealing with these small fries. They were the ones he was waiting for. The ball of light in his hand had already condensed to the size of a wash basin. He stood on the platform and spun rapidly with the ball of light, turning into a ball of clear shadow. He had also used all his hands, and his 10 fingers quickly interspersed with the wash basin-sized ball of light. In an instant, the surface of the golden pillar flower burst forth with an intense radiance. Countless finger-sized rays of light rapidly burst forth, and like a dense rain, they splashed in all directions. Almost at the same time as Bai Changchun made his move, Yu Qianqiu cursed inwardly. This old man might not even recognize his own family when he was angry. One of his wrists was still being held by Qingyang. He immediately shook his hand and anxiously transmitted his voice, "Run. It'll be too late if we're too late." The two of them had more or less developed some tacit understanding during this period of time. Qingyang could feel the fear in his heart and subconsciously chose to believe him. Without another word, she dragged him and fled with all her might. However, the speed at which the two of them fled was ultimately not as fast as the killing speed of the lost immortal finger. Otherwise, with Grey Cloud Xian's cultivation, he would not have been unable to escape. An earth-shattering scream rang out from behind them. The 2 people who were running away turned around to look, and their faces were instantly filled with terror. They saw blood blooming in the sky like rain, and within the blood blossoms, there was a sharp light that was as short and sharp as bullets that had yet to fade. Seeing the dense rays of light rushing toward them, Yu Qianqiu cursed Bai Changchun in his heart. This was 2F*King ridiculous. He clearly knew that he was here but he still attacked indiscriminately. It seemed like this old man knew that he had the ability to escape, so he only cared about killing to his heart's content. He didn't care about his disciples' feelings at all. However, the key point was that he didn't want to abandon Qingyang and escape alone. The two of them had interacted for a period of time, and he discovered that this woman was actually a warm person on the inside. She wasn't a bad person, and it would be a pity if she died for nothing. However, the time they had interacted with each other was not enough for him to trust her enough to bring her back to Utopia. Qingyang was clearly shocked by the destructive power of the lost immortal finger, but she rarely left the Paradise Immortal realm. In addition, she was dancing at the Celestial Emperor's wedding. Aside from dancing accessories, she didn't have anything else on her. Thus, she didn't have any treasures that could block the attack. Even at such a critical moment, she still didn't abandon the burden that was Yu Qianqiu. Instead, she did her best to drag Yu Qianqiu along with her. As the saying goes, good will always be rewarded. This scum, Yu Qianqiu, often did things that were one-track minded. Yu Qianqiu, who couldn't think of a way to satisfy both sides, waved his hand and released an expanding golden light. He hugged Qingyang's soft waist tightly with one arm, and the golden umbrella that emitted a golden brilliance protected the two of them. Even so, the dense and sharp lights were like a series of cannons. The two of them were sent tumbling along with the umbrella, and the golden brilliance of the golden umbrella gradually dimmed. Qingyang was a little surprised that Yu Qianqiu actually had a golden umbrella in his hands. However, she didn't think too much of it and thought that it was a gift from the Celestial Emperor. At the same time, she could see that Yu Qianqiu's cultivation was too low and couldn't unleash the defensive power of the golden umbrella. She immediately stretched out a hand and grabbed the back of Yu Qianqiu's hand that was holding the handle of the umbrella. With her help, the golden brilliance of the golden umbrella exploded, and it immediately blocked the endless stream of sharp lights. It steadily protected the two of them as they escaped. The commander of the law enforcement squad, Gao, was the first to realize that something was wrong. When he sensed that the terrifying killer move was about to explode, he immediately roared, "Retreat! Retreat!" He immediately took out the golden umbrella and withstood the powerful attack at close range, then quickly retreated. However, the others were not so lucky. After all, the golden umbrella personally refined by immortal Emperor Jin Tai was not given to just anyone. Under the explosive attack of the lost immortal finger, even someone with Cangyun Xian's cultivation couldn't escape, let alone the others. A tragic massacre immediately appeared in front of everyone's eyes. For a moment, miserable screams resounded in the sky. Among the large group of people who came to attack from the sky, only a few were able to escape in one piece. Almost all of them were turned into bloody sieves. This was only the first wave of people to suffer. The guards of the Immortal Palace, who were originally lined up in the square, were the most unlucky group of people. For a moment there were wails and cries, and in an instant blood flowed like a river. It was simply too horrible to look at. As the power of the lost immortal finger continued to spread, many of the palace masters on the 3,600 mountains of the Paradise of Bliss on both sides of the stairs were not spared. The 12 immortal monarchs sitting on the stairs were also startled. Together with several commanders, they almost simultaneously flashed to immortal Emperor Jin Tai's carriage. They seemed to be protecting him, but no matter how one looked at it, it looked like they were seeking the immortal emperor's protection. The immortal emperor was indeed the immortal emperor. At the critical moment he did not disappoint everyone. Jin Tai waved his hand and a pale golden wall of light quickly spread out to block the front. This position was originally a place that had received special attention from Bai Changchun. The fierce rays that erupted from the lost immortal finger were far denser than in other places. Countless fierce lights poured down, striking the light golden wall of light and exploding. The result was like raindrops falling onto the surface of a lake. Although ripples were created, they were utterly unable to break through it, let alone injure the person hiding behind it. On the contrary, the nearly 1,000 sect masters sitting below were all really impressive. Almost every sect had a trump card that could save their lives at the critical moment. In an instant, all kinds of strange treasures were revealed. Under the indiscriminate attack of the lost immortal finger, not many of them died. They no longer cared about giving face to the immortal emperor. Saving their lives was their top priority. One by one they scattered like birds and beasts, hurriedly fleeing far away to watch the show. However, there was a blue-robed man with a silver mask on his face who didn't flee. He sat there as steady as Mount Tai, and when the beams of light shot towards him, he touched the snow-blue ring on his left hand's index finger. After which, his hands moved like a phantom, and he used the powerful defensive power of the snow-blue ring to destroy the beams of light that shot towards him. Bai Changchun saw that the lost immortal finger attack had no effect, so he waved his hand and ejected the last small ball of light, directly hitting the mystic wave light wall that Kinta had cast. Boom! There was a loud explosion as the mystic wave light wall surged with huge waves, but it still didn't break. This was already within Bai Changchun's expectations. If an immortal emperor couldn't even block his lost immortal finger, then it would really be strange. On the contrary, it was Wang Qin who was sitting as steady as a mountain, who attracted Bai Changchun's attention. There were mutilated corpses everywhere below. The huge square made of gold was full of potholes, collecting and storing the blood that was flowing everywhere. The magnificent immortal palace layout was completely destroyed. The densely packed living people could no longer be seen. Those who didn't die had already fled far away and didn't dare to come close. Chapter 1087. Slaughtering people like weeds? What a powerful killer move. Qing Yang, who was hiding in the golden umbrella in the distance, couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air when she turned around. Her mind was filled with the scene of the explosion, the blinding light, and the miserable screams. Just thinking about the scene of flesh and blood flying everywhere made her scalp go numb. Then she looked back at Yu Qianqiu and asked curiously, "You told me to run before that person made his move. You seem to have known that there would be danger. Have you seen this killer move before?" Yu Qianqiu, who was hugging her soft waist, smiled bitterly. "Of course I have seen it before. I'm afraid no one in this world has seen it as many times as I have." Tu Tsangyun Xn was slaughtered like a dog under the lost immortal finger. With so many people crowded together like vegetables, under the indiscriminate attack of the lost immortal finger, it would be strange if blood did not flow like a river. "No, it's just a hunch," Yu Qianqiu said perfunctorily, but his heart was filled with emotion. The power of the lost immortal finger had grown with the old man's cultivation, and its lethality had become stronger and stronger. Nie Shaoqian, the chief steward of internal affairs of the immortal palace, also withdrew her gaze from the two of them. Seeing that the two of them had escaped at such a critical moment, her tensed eyes clearly showed a sense of relief, and her attention returned to the scene. At this time, the entire golden world was filled with a strong smell of blood. Even Emperor of the Underworld, Bai Qi, who was standing in front of the window of the immortal palace's pavilion, could not help but frown. Bai Qi looked at Jin Tai, who had suddenly stood up and snorted coldly. He couldn't help but find it funny. If this guy did not like to put on airs like an emperor, he would not have lost so many of his men at once. What was the difference between this and letting others slaughter them? Immortal Crocodile Monarch Ji Wu and Lu Yanqing were all stunned. Although they knew that Bai Changchun was powerful, they did not expect that he would deal an unbearable blow to the entire immortal palace. Killing people like grass, he was indeed not a soft-hearted person. The two people in front silently exchanged glances and saw hope in each other's eyes. The two of them started to look around and finally locked their gazes on Yu Qianqiu. Right below the floating immortal palace, the nearly 10,000 sect masters from the various sects were all dumbfounded. They didn't expect that on such a day, a madman would come to the immortal palace and start a massacre in front of the immortal emperor. Too powerful. Kill? Jin Tai shouted. The paragons of the immortal world couldn't help but give the order. The entire vast golden world was suddenly filled with a murderous aura. Thousands of figures teleported from all directions almost without warning. They were the palace masters of the paradise immortal realm who had luckily escaped from the sidewalks on both sides. They swarmed towards Bai Changchun like a swarm of bees. The entire square was instantly filled with loud rumbling sounds. All kinds of flowing lights interweaved and cut like a net. All kinds of treasures were launched at the same time, dazzling the onlookers. Everyone seemed to know that Bai Changchun needed time to prepare his lost immortal finger. This was no different from a sneak attack. 1,000 experts launched a sneak attack together, clearly not giving Bai Changchun a chance to cast his lost immortal finger. "TSK, Jin Tai, wait until I kill all your lackeys. Let's see how long you can hide." Bai Changchun, who was surrounded by 1,000 experts, let out an impassioned roar. The battle had almost reached its climax in an instant. The entire peak of Huabiao was surrounded by figures. Light and shadow intertwined. No matter how high the cultivation of the people outside was, they couldn't see the battle inside clearly. Loud sounds shook the entire immortal palace, and angry shouts resounded through the sky. People kept screaming as they were eliminated from the light and shadow. Those who fell to the ground either had their heads smashed, their chests punctured, or their entire bodies torn in half. There were even people who were constantly ejected from the battlefield who let loose thunderous roars of fury in the distance. and they revealed their true forms as immortal beasts. There were huge flying snakes, ferocious warms, huge eagles with wings flapping, giant scorpions waving their pincers. Some flew in the sky, some swam in the water, some ran on the ground, and some dug into the ground. These fellows bared their fangs, and ferocious faces revealed their true forms. They swayed their huge bodies and circled outside the fierce battle, looking for an opportunity to attack. These immortal beasts were tamed from young fierce beasts by the immortal palace for many years. It wasn't easy for them to reach their current cultivation. Most importantly, they were all immortal beasts that had reached the level of immortal Emperor Jintai. Seeing its comrades die one by one, a giant flood dragon with a pair of red eyes suddenly swung its huge tail. The huge tail covered in thick scales swept out, and with a boom sound, the huge huabiao with a diameter of tens of meters collapsed with a loud rumble. As soon as the already scarred huabiao fell to the ground, Bai Changchun suddenly shouted, "Evil beast, you're courting death." A green shadow shot directly from the surrounding crowd in the air. A giant eagle with wings flapping immediately swooped down. Its two sharp claws quickly clawed, causing the air to explode. The speed of the green shadow was even faster. Its figure flashed in the air and dodged. Its 10 fingers were like demonic claws, directly inserting into the giant eagle's claws that were covered in scales. Its arms grabbed the giant eagle's tree-like calf and twisted forcefully. Immediately, the crisp sound of bones breaking could be heard. As soon as the giant eagle let out a deafening scream, the skinny figure in a green robe immediately slammed into its abdomen. At the same time he waved his palm. The palm carried a gust of wind that was like a knife, directly cutting the giant eagle's belly open. In an instant, a rain of blood poured down. Although the figure wrapped in a green robe was skinny, it was full of explosive speed. Go! With a sonorous roar, he flipped through the air at an incredible speed and kicked out violently from under the hem of his green robe. He directly kicked the huge body of the giant eagle and knocked over several of his companions in the air. This series of movements was so fast that it was almost completed in the blink of an eye, dazzling everyone who was watching. When everyone reacted from his movements, they saw that at the same time he kicked, the figure was already standing on the head of a giant scorpion, forcibly breaking off the giant scorpion's two huge pincers. Holding a pincer in each hand, he waved the huge pincer in one hand to smash away the giant scorpion's poisonous stinger that was madly stabbing at the head of the giant scorpion, while the other hand threw out a huge pincer to smash the giant golden-haired sky-drilling mouse that was shooting over, causing its brain to burst open, and it fell to the ground with a wail. The two pieces of the pincer had penetrated the head of the giant scorpion that was covered with carapace and inserted into its head. Before the green figure had landed on the ground, he had already waved his hand repeatedly, directly chopping off the huge heads of two immortal beasts, and casually threw them away to smash away another two huge fellows that were attacking from below. Bai Changchun rushed out of the encirclement and made a clean and neat move. The surrounding ferocious beasts were so scared that they did not dare to come close. The others gasped when they saw this. In the immortal underworld and netherworld, it was rare to see a guy who was so strong in close combat with his physical body. Moreover, it was such a skinny old man who looked so weak. It should be known that the cultivation of these immortal beasts was at least at the early stage of the immortal emperor. Because they were all domesticated and loyal to the immortal emperor since they were young, Jintai could be said to have used the largest amount of resources and did not hesitate to create them. Seeing Bai Changchun fighting a group of immortal beasts with the cultivation of the immortal emperor with his physical body, and slaughtering them with ease under such a dense attack, no matter which immortal beast encountered him, it would die miserably like a piece of paper. How could everyone not be shocked? Even Jintai's expression changed slightly. He, who was always calm and expressionless, actually had a somewhat pained expression on his face. Lu Yanqing, who was beside her, opened her red lips slightly, as if she was seeing the #1 expert in the human world who fought against the heavens and the earth. But this time the battlefield had moved to the immortal world, and it was the immortal palace that ruled the immortal world, but he was still as strong as ever. Immortal Crocodile subconsciously touched his neck, a little fear in his eyes. He did not know what would happen if the skinny old man's palm hit his neck. In the distance, Yu Qianzhou's expression twitched. From Bai Changchun's movements he could see the shadow of animal play, that heroic spirit that could reach the clouds. No matter how many enemies there were, he could predict the enemy's moves and kill without mercy. Peng. Accompanied by the sound of bones shattering, Bai Changchun's knee had already knocked against the forehead of the giant flood dragon that was sweeping across the room. The giant dragon's skull was broken and blood and brain matter spurted out. Immediately, it let out a miserable howl. Bai Changchun snorted coldly, his hands grabbing the two fangs of the giant dragon. At the same time, his knees and hands exerted force, directly breaking the upper jaw and half of the giant dragon's head. The giant dragon's head, which was bigger than a big round table, was directly broken and turned upside down. It was a cruel and bloody scene. His green robe was stained with blood, and his murderous aura soared to the sky. Bai Changchun suddenly turned around, accompanied by a sonorous snort, his eyes like lightning staring at the group of immortal beasts behind him. The group of immortal beasts was actually frightened and flew back, but when they saw the immortal emperor's expression, they immediately rushed down with a deafening roar. Although the giant dragon under Bai Changchun was dead, it was not stiff. Although its broken head was pressed to the ground by Bai Changchun and could not move, its long tail subconsciously attacked. Bai Changchun sprang up and swept his arm. His 5 claws were like hooks, and they directly inserted into the tail of the giant flood dragon. He grabbed the tailbone and shook it casually. The giant flood dragon's huge body shook like a wave. All the bones inside were suddenly dislocated, and it could never move again. Whoosh! The air swirled in all directions, and the giant dragon's body was like a whip that was swung away by Bai Changchun. Bang! Bang! A few immortal beasts were hit by the big meat whip and flew away. Bai Changchun stood on the ground, swinging the big whip left and right, until the giant dragon's huge body was broken into pieces, and the other immortal beasts did not dare to come close. Then he casually threw his hand and his whole body teleported away. Chapter 1088. The sound spread to the entire Paradise Wonderland. Anyone could hear that these words were deliberately provoking Jin Tai. However, this was not the case. Bai Changchun's eyes always glanced at the blue-robed man with a silver mask on his face below the stairs. Although Bai Changchun didn't know him, he didn't know what was going on. He vaguely sensed that this person exuded a dangerous aura. In fact, it wasn't really detected, but Bai Changchun sensed it by intuition. Since he started practicing bird play, the instinct that was stronger than a beast had never been wrong, so it aroused his vigilance from the beginning. But the strange thing was that he couldn't sense the dangerous aura later. No matter how fierce the fight was, this person closed his eyes and sat there quietly like a dead tree or stagnant water. He should have entered a certain state. Being able to enter this state on this occasion made Bai Changchun even more vigilant. He had been trying to figure out the identity of this person. The others below had run away, but he was still sitting here indifferently. He didn't know if he was a trusted subordinate of the immortal Emperor Jin Tai. Although Bai Changchun was belligerent and arrogant, he was definitely not a fool. Otherwise, he would have been killed before he could even make a name for himself in the human world. The path that he pursued was not equivalent to throwing away his life in vain. There was no meaning in that. If he knew that there was a person who could make him feel dangerous and he didn't keep vigilance once he was killed by a sneak attack, it was equivalent to dying stupidly. It had nothing to do with others. If it wasn't so, he wouldn't bother to fight with these small characters at all. He would have directly made a move on Jin Tai. Because of this, Bai Changchun provoked him. If this person was Jin Tai's subordinate, Jin Tai, who had been using the lives of his subordinates as a test, would let this person make a move at this time. He was like this, but he didn't know that Jin Tai was also worried about Wang Qing. Otherwise, how could he let Bai Changchun lose face in public like this? Was the face of an immortal emperor so worthless? It must be known that Jin Tai was not a reckless person who could rule the immortal world for so many years. A real reckless person would not be able to walk to the end. How could there be so much good luck between life and death? Wang Qing sitting here quietly alone made Jin Tai feel that something was wrong. He absolutely didn't believe that Wang Qing didn't leave until now to stay and be loyal to him. That was simply a big joke. He even suspected that Bai Changchun's arrival at this time was arranged with Wang Qing. How dare you? How dare you? The voices rose and fell. The 12 immortal monarchs exchanged glances with each other solemnly. The others were also ready to make a move. At this time they had to make a move. Arrogant bastard. Jin Tai's sneer was equivalent to stopping his men from coming out. Not only did he not get angry because of Bai Changchun's words, but he also regained his calmness. He stared coldly at Wang Qing, who was sitting below, and pointed at him arrogantly. Wang Qing, as the sect master of the #1 sect in the celestial world, Heartless Palace, you ought to teach this arrogant fellow a lesson lest he thinks that there is no one capable in the celestial world. Bai Changchun's eyes slightly flickered as he stared at Wang Qing. So this was the sect master of the #1 sect in the celestial world, the Heartless Palace. He had heard of this person from Yu Qianqiu. The eyes under the silver mask still couldn't be closed. An indifferent voice came from under the mask. The immortal emperor is flattering Wang Qing. Wang Qing is just a defeated opponent of the immortal emperor. With the immortal emperor here, it is not Wang Qing's turn to show off. Moreover, the immortal emperor has many experts under him. With the 12 immortal monarchs, any one of them is stronger than Wang Qing. This was a euphemistic refusal. Nie Xiaoqian immediately shouted, "Wang Qing! You dare to disobey the immortal emperor's decree?" Wang Qing sat there indifferently, completely ignoring her. Jin Tai's eyes narrowed slightly and his tone became heavier. "Wang Qing! I order you to eliminate this arrogant bastard for the celestial world." Wang Qing is here to congratulate the immortal emperor's wedding. After the wedding, Wang Qing will return to the Heartless Palace. The other matters have nothing to do with me, the voice under the mask said lightly. The nearly 10,000 sect masters below the Celestial Palace were in an uproar. Wang Qing's words clearly showed that he was disobeying immortal Emperor Jin Tai's decree. This wedding was getting more and more chaotic. Inside the Celestial Palace, Emperor of Hell Bai Qi, who had his hands on the window, put his hands behind his back and began to re-examine the sect master of the Heartless Palace, Wang Qing, who had publicly disobeyed the immortal emperor's decree. Jin Tai was not angry. He only slightly nodded and said, "It seems that I am too merciful. After this, it is time for the order of the celestial world to be restored." Then he looked at the figure on the platform and let out a mighty voice that shook the heaven and earth. "Left and right protectors, immortal monarchs, listen to my order, kill this bastard immediately." A chorus of voices sounded. Before the 30 figures moved, they heard by Changchun's deep voice that shook the heaven and earth, "There is righteousness in heaven and earth, righteousness, condense." He suddenly spread his arms, and the atmosphere between the heavens and the earth suddenly froze. Immediately, a brilliant heavenly might descended, and an invisible and majestic aura covered the sky and the earth, rushing over from all directions. He did not dare to underestimate the subordinates that immortal Emperor Jin Tai used. At the same time, after understanding Wang Qing's position, he did not want to waste any more time with Jin Tai's subordinates. He wanted to end the battle quickly and directly fight Jin Tai, so he immediately used the righteousness technique that could borrow the power of heaven and earth. It was on a completely different level from the condense formula that he usually used in a small area. One must know that he was dealing with so many masters at the same time. In an instant, the 12 immortal monarchs and the remaining 18 protectors were frozen in the air, and it was extremely difficult for them to move. Under the righteousness, the unusually pungent smell of blood was instantly swept away, and the river of blood on the ground quickly turned into smoke, dispersing in the blink of an eye along with the lingering clouds and mist. The blazing sun in the clear sky was like fire. Under the direct rays of the sun, the entire immortal palace shone even more brilliantly. The golden ground, which was full of potholes, was deforming at a visible speed. Under the heavy pressure, the golden railings and arches that were erected in the surroundings were like candles meeting fire, sinking rapidly as if they were melting. Wang Qing was still sitting in the same place, but the golden table where he sat was untouched, and even the wine and delicacies on the table were still in the same place. A pale golden ball of light quickly expanded from Jin Tai's body. With a wave of his golden sleeve, the ball of light wrapped around the 10 people in front of him and separated from him. He casually pushed the 10 people out of the range of the huge pressure, and directly flew into the main hall of the immortal palace. The 10 people who were sent away. Chief Major Domo Nie Xiaoqian and the 6 commanders were in charge of everything inside and outside the immortal palace. They needed to contribute to the reconstruction of the post-war order. Ji Wu was his immortal empress, so these 8 people naturally needed to be protected. As for Yi Xuejuan and Lu Yanqing, they came along for the sake of his newlywed wife. Jin Tai glanced at Wang Qing, who made him hesitate, and suddenly seemed to think of something. He slowly looked back in the direction of the pavilion of the immortal palace, and suddenly snorted coldly. He waved his sleeves and the sunken golden ground quickly swelled back to its original state. Even the golden railings and arches that had melted under the heavy pressure were uprooted from the ground again, looking brand new. The nearly 10,000 sect leaders who were watching the battle on the ground were all silent, and their eyes were wide open. Immortal Emperor Jin Tai finally made a move, and this scene was not easy to see. Jin Tai waved his golden sleeves in the void, and the 12 immortal monarchs and the 18 protectors immediately felt the heavy pressure decrease sharply, but the pressure of heaven and earth was endless, and after a slight decrease, it instantly pressed down again. However, when they saw Jin Tai make a move, their confidence soared. All of them shouted loudly, and the 30 people began to rotate together, trying to resist the pressure of heaven and earth, but it was very difficult. Jin Tai immediately understood the intention of his subordinates. If they did not break this powerful pressure of heaven and earth, even if they made a move, they would only be a hindrance. In addition, there was also Wang Qing who was plotting against them below, so he waved his golden sleeves to help. The 30 people were able to use their strength to activate their cultivation, and finally they rotated faster and faster, bringing with them the pressure of heaven and earth. The tens of meters in diameter under Bai Changchun's feet quickly became twisted. Bai Changchun was slightly surprised. After a short exchange, he knew that Jin Tai's cultivation was indeed much higher than his. At the same time, these people's method of breaking the pressure was also correct. If they continued to rotate, the condensed pressure would be stirred into a vortex, and there would be no way to use the pressure of heaven and earth to restrict their movements. The Celestial Emperor had not even made a move yet. In the distance, Yu Qianzhou, who was watching the battle, suddenly became nervous. He had already let go of Qingyang's arm, and both of his palms were clenched with purple flames. If anything went wrong, he would communicate with the heaven and earth to summon endless heavenly lightning to help. If it really came to that, he could not care less about the old man's displeasure if he interfered. Qingyang immediately felt his abnormality, and she looked at him suspiciously, not knowing what he was so nervous about. The name of the Celestial Emperor is indeed not in vain. Bai Changchun's hands quickly formed a series of hand seals and he shouted, "Jin Tai, I want to see if you can save their lives from this old man's power of the heaven's grand art." The green sleeves fluttered, and the pressure of heaven and earth suddenly became extremely strange and domineering. Even the rays of light from the blazing sun were strangely twisted, and it was as if the world had changed. The pressure of heaven and earth instantly broke free from their control. The expressions of the 30 people changed dramatically, and they were almost scared out of their wits. The terrifying power had penetrated their pores in an instant, and it was unstoppable. Chapter 1089. No wonder you were able to escape from the Netherworld Forbidden Land alive after being severely injured by Bai Qi. You actually managed to comprehend the restrictions of the Netherworld Forbidden Land. Is this what you're relying on to be so arrogant? Jin Tai sneered. Unfortunately, its power is far inferior to the real restrictions of the Ghost World Forbidden Land. It can't do anything to me. It could be seen that he had also tried to break into the Ghost World Forbidden Land, otherwise he wouldn't have been able to see through the mysteries of the Ghost World Forbidden Land. An uncontrollable majestic aura suddenly erupted from Jin Tai's body, covering the sky and covering the earth. Everyone in the sky and on the ground instantly felt the terrifying aura that made their hearts palpitate. Jin Tai's entire body was instantly covered in a layer of golden light, like a dream or illusion, majestic and awe-inspiring, like a god descending to the mortal world. Everyone knew that Jin Tai was about to officially make his move, and all eyes were focused on the two people in a stalemate. Yu Qianzhou was especially worried. In the strangely distorted space of the heavens, Bai Changchun's green robe was abnormally twisting and rolling like boiling water. However, every slight change involved the strange power in the distorted space. Bai Changchun stared at Jin Tai, not the slightest contempt. The golden table and chair in front of Jin Tai instantly sank into the stairs, and with a majestic aura, he flicked his sleeves and stepped in the void, step by step, towards Bai Changchun, who was standing on the twisted table like a fried dough twist. The golden light on his body forced open the nearly distorted space around him. Humph! Bai Changchun let out a cold snort and waved his palm. His green robe sleeves billowed like waves, and Kintara's footsteps paused for a moment. The 2-meter-thick golden clouds around his body were immediately thinned by the strange twisting and dividing force. You really have some skill. Kinta's gorgeous golden robe trembled slightly, and the 2-meter-thick golden mist quickly condensed into a transparent, close-fitting golden light, like a golden armor attached to his body. Once again he stepped into the air and closed in on Bai Changchun, but the speed of his footsteps was obviously a lot slower. Seeing that the opponent was getting closer and closer, Bai Changchun slowly clapped his palms together in front of Jin Tai. The green robe on his skinny body immediately swelled up like crazy waves, as if it would fly away from his skinny body at any time. Jin Tai's slow steps immediately became difficult to advance even half an inch. Everyone held their breaths as they watched the two men's every move. Although there wasn't a stormy battle, everyone knew that this peaceful scene contained great power. Ordinary experts wouldn't even have the qualifications to intervene. Behind the stalemate was endless danger. A single mistake could lead to death. This was a battle between experts. Inside the window of the pavilion of the Celestial Palace, the Emperor of the Underworld, Bai Qi, silently observed the subtle changes of the two people who were in a stalemate. On the top of the roof, Wang Qin, dressed in a blue robe, stood with his hands clasped behind his back. The eyes under the silver mask began to gradually close again. It seemed that he didn't want to care about anything in the outside world anymore. Yu Qianqiu clenched his fists tightly and did not even blink. He was so nervous that he did not even dare to breathe. Time flew by bit by bit. The blazing sun was gradually setting in the west. Heaven and earth were quiet, without the slightest sound. Jin Tai, who couldn't advance even half a step, finally couldn't help but snort coldly. "No wonder you dare to come and make trouble. Your methods are indeed extraordinary. Wait for me to break it with force." As soon as his voice fell, before the crowd could see how he attacked, they heard a loud boom sound. His arms shot out like cannons, and the whole celestial palace floating in the air trembled. The strangely distorted space was suddenly filled with a powerful burst of energy and expanded rapidly. Bai Changchun's face changed slightly. With his cultivation and the time he spent comprehending this way, it was impossible for him to control this huge force in an instant. The space set up by the all-heaven power dissolving technique immediately exploded in an uncontrollable disorder. Countless turbulence from the explosion cut through the air with a hissing sound, dissipating into nothingness in the blink of an eye. It was really broken by Jin Tai's forceful strength. At the same time when the all-heaven power dissolving technique was broken, the two men disappeared almost at the same time. Everyone's heart skipped a beat. The golden-robed figure flashed, and Jin Tai's speed was obviously faster. His 5 fingers grabbed at Bai Changchun as fast as lightning, like an eagle catching a chick. With his cultivation, if Bai Changchun was caught by him, he would be seriously injured even if he didn't die. However, Bai Changchun's reaction was not slow. Jin Tai's claw grabbed nothing but a disappearing shadow. What made everyone dumbfounded was that at the same time that Kintara's claw appeared out of thin air, a green-robed shadow appeared behind him. The shadow had not yet completely appeared, but the shadow of a fist was like a collapsing mountain. Bang! It directly hit Kintara's back, hitting him solidly. Kintara immediately flew out violently. This sudden scene almost made everyone's jaws drop. The result was too different from what they had imagined. Jin Tai's cultivation and speed were obviously higher than Bai Changchun's. Why did it seem like he was going to be beaten by Bai Changchun? It didn't seem like something the superior Jin Tai would do. From the window of the pavilion of the Immortal Palace, Bai Qi, who saw Jin Tai being sent flying, couldn't help but reveal a mocking smile. He had the mentality of watching a show. Why did Jin Tai suffer a loss? Perhaps only he who had fought with Bai Changchun knew the reason best. Bai Changchun's reaction could be said to be extremely fast. Often, before you made a move, he had a premonition of what you were going to do next. If it wasn't for his speed that was far beyond Bai Changchun's, it would be difficult for him to hurt him at that time. Although Bai Changchun's cultivation was not as good as Jin Tai's, the power of this punch was not small. Ah! Jin Tai was hit and let out a muffled groan. He himself suffered this punch inexplicably. He thought that he had been careless just now. Immediately, he disappeared into thin air again. In a flash, he teleported back and furiously slapped out a palm. It seemed that he couldn't wait to directly smash Bai Changchun into a meat patty. However, when he struck out with his palm, he discovered that he had struck another shadow. He immediately sensed that something was amiss. There was a loud bang behind his left ear almost at the same time, and he was once again sent flying in a daze. This time he was not so lucky. He was far more embarrassed than last time. Not to mention that his left ear was kicked by Changchun, the dignified golden crown on his head was directly sent flying away, clanking noises as it fell in the distance. Looking at the disheveled Jin Tai being kicked away, there was a sudden uproar. Could it be that Jin Tai's era in the immortal world was about to end? F***ck. In the distance, Yu Qianqiu was so shocked that he burst out with a curse. This old fellow beat the immortal emperor in front of everyone. This time he had gained a lot of face. Even if he lost in the end, it was worth it. Everyone was still in a daze. Bang! Bai Changchun roared and disappeared from everyone's line of sight. He began to take the initiative to attack. Because he was defeated by the underworld king Bai Qi before, it left a shadow in his heart. He was truly shocked by Bai Qi's super speed, so he was wary of the equally famous immortal emperor Jin Tai. However, after 2 successful attacks, Bai Changchun understood that Jin Tai's speed was far inferior to Bai Qi's. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been humiliated in front of everyone. He immediately decided to go all out. Bang bang bang! A series of explosions mixed with Jin Tai's shameful and angry shouts caused the entire floating immortal palace to violently shake. The golden and azure shadows were so fast that it left people speechless. The entire square was filled with the shadows of the two of them. The two of them crazily intertwined with each other as they furiously fought. For a moment, killing intent soared to the sky, and a whirlwind swept away the clouds. The powerful aura almost forced the people in the distance to close their eyes. Wherever the two of them fought, they destroyed everything. The vast golden plaza had already become a mess. Huge craters could be seen everywhere in the blink of an eye. Large gold decorations that were originally on the plaza were constantly being twisted and sent flying everywhere. The two of them broke through gold like it was a piece of paper. They had super destructive power. Not long after, everyone vaguely noticed something strange from the movements of the two. Every time the two of them fought, the golden figure would stagger again and again as if it was being punched, kicked, kneed, and elbowed by the azure figure. It was as if it was beaten to the point where it didn't even have the strength to fight back. Everyone couldn't help but look at each other. Was this really the aloof immortal emperor? The muscles on Yu Qianqiu's face twitched as he laughed foolishly. He almost applauded. He didn't expect this old man to be so tough. Hi! A roar resounded through the heaven and earth. The disheveled Jin Tai suddenly broke away from the battle and instantly distanced himself from Bai Changchun. Bai Changchun also violently retreated. One of the two of them floated on one end of the square while the other floated on the other end, staring at each other from a distance. Jin Tai's body flashed with a golden light and he turned back into the incomparably dignified immortal emperor. His eyes were about to split open as he stared at the distant Bai Changchun. After being beaten up by the opponent for a while, he regained his senses. After a moment of reflection, he discovered that he was really muddle-headed from anger. He clearly knew that the opponent was extremely strong in close combat, but he still gave up his advantage to fight in close combat. Wasn't this just seeking humiliation? In fact, this matter was the same no matter who it was. Those who were used to being high and mighty would naturally subconsciously want to fight back when they were suddenly punched and kicked in public. If they didn't suffer losses, they wouldn't reflect on their own mistakes. If they won, they would think that they were strong. Bai Changchun, on the other hand, felt that his hands, feet, elbows, and knees were faintly numb. He was inwardly shocked at Jin Tai's powerful physical defense. Most ordinary deity realm experts probably wouldn't be able to withstand so many heavy blows from him, right? After hitting Jin Tai several hundred times, he still didn't cause any serious injuries. There was no point in continuing to fight like this. He wouldn't be able to defeat Jin Tai even if he used up his cultivation. If he continued to fight like this, he would definitely be at a disadvantage. Thus he took the opportunity to stop. Good, good, good. Jin Tai said good 3 times in a row. It could be said that he was so angry that he laughed. He floated in the air and opened his arms. With an imposing manner that seemed like he was embracing the heaven and earth, he said in a clear voice, "The sky of the immortal world is my sky. The land of the immortal world is my land. No one can take it away. This immortal palace is my world. In my world, anyone who dares to offend me will be punished." Chapter 1090. Boom. As soon as these words came out, the entire vast and magnificent immortal palace suddenly erupted with a golden light that shot into the sky. Above the firmament, a single stone set off 1,000 ripples. Waves of air surged angrily towards the surrounding sky like water and clouds. The majestic and unparalleled aura shook the heavens and the earth, giving off a domineering feeling that it could kill everything in the world. It was as if the sky had been pierced through in an instant. Those sect leaders who were originally standing at the edge of the immortal palace to watch the show from afar were all shocked. The domineering power suddenly erupted in front of them, and it was too late to dodge. Almost all of them desperately pushed out their palms in an attempt to resist the majestic and unparalleled aura that was rapidly rushing towards them. Boom boom boom. A series of explosions rang out around the immortal palace, mixed with countless screams. Wan Bushing's beard and hair stood on end as he forcefully protected Wan Ling with his gang chi to withstand the unparalleled shockwave. In an instant he was blown away. Long Sheng also protected Long Xiaojiu and was sent flying. The cultivation of these two sect leaders was considered good, but the others did not have such a good ending. Nearly half of the nearly 1,000 sect leaders were instantly killed by the shockwave, exploding into a mist of blood. Not even a complete bone could be found. Nearly half of the remaining people vomited a mouthful of blood and fell to the ground. It was unknown whether they were dead or alive. Most of the others who were still in the air were more or less injured to varying degrees. It was unknown whether those sect leaders who were complacent because they were ranked within the top 1,000 and were able to attend the Immortal Palace could still be happy. As for those sect leaders who were sitting below to watch the show, they were secretly rejoicing. They deeply felt that in life there were gains and losses and they could not be forced at all. When an immortal emperor was enraged, blood would flow like a river. Wan Ling and Long Xiaojiu looked at each other from afar with fear in their hearts. If it weren't for the protection of the sect leaders of the two sects, the two of them would have been dead by now. The two women were already a little afraid to continue watching the battle. The battle between these top-notch experts often involved a large number of people. It was really too terrifying. It was not something that people with shallow cultivation like them could get close to and watch the show. However, for someone at Wan Bushing's level, how could he miss such a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? Perhaps today's comprehension would be tomorrow's breakthrough, so he naturally had to continue watching. Moreover, the closer he got, the better it would be because he would be able to see more clearly. On the other side, Yu Qianqiu was also in a daze. He was sent flying with the golden umbrella. Fortunately, the golden umbrella was controlled by Qing Yang, who had reached the early stage of the Immortal Emperor stage. Otherwise, even if he didn't die, he would be heavily injured. The golden light soared into the sky and quickly shrunk back to envelop the Immortal Palace. The entire vast Immortal Palace seemed to have been covered by a transparent glass bowl in an instant. As soon as the surrounding aura shrunk back, Yu Qianqiu couldn't wait to get closer to Qing Yang. Otherwise, with his cultivation he wouldn't be able to see too far away. However, Qing Yang refused to let the two of them take the risk. The people inside the Immortal Palace didn't suffer any injuries. They only felt that the entire Immortal Palace and Jin Tai had become one. The air was filled with Jin Tai's unquestionable majestic aura. Jin Tai's every move affected everything in the Immortal Palace, as if he could decide the life and death of anyone in an instant. At this moment, the people inside the glass bowl finally understood Jin Tai's bold words. It was really like what he said. This Immortal Palace is my world. In my world, anyone who dares to offend will be punished. Wang Qing, who was standing at the top of the Immortal Palace, still had an indifferent look. Even after such a huge change, he still couldn't open his eyes under the silver mask. Behind the window of the pavilion, the barefooted emperor of the underworld, Bai Qi, looked at Jin Tai who was floating in the air. His eyes flashed, then he stared at the motionless Bai Changchun with an expression that said, "Let's see if Bai Changchun can handle this or not." They could only feel the endless pressure from Jin Tai in their hearts, but they didn't know that Bai Changchun's entire body was enduring the endless pressure. The huge pressure made it hard for him to move, and he had to summon all of his cultivation to resist. Jin Tai waved his sleeves, and the golden plaza that was almost completely destroyed by the fierce battle was instantly restored to its original state. Then he grabbed the air and Bai Changchun, who was suffering under the heavy pressure, couldn't bear it anymore. With a piu sound he spat out a mouthful of blood. The blood instantly turned into a red mist under the heavy pressure. His entire body was like a shooting star that was pulled over by Jin Tai. He didn't have the slightest ability to resist at all. "How dare you? You dare to blaspheme this lord, do you know your crime?" Jin Tai's majestic voice reverberated in the world. His grand golden robe with dragons coiling in the sea of clouds shined with a brilliant light. The majesty of an immortal emperor reappeared in the paradise wonderland. Bai Changchun, who felt as if he was carrying an iron mountain, slowly raised his head and said with great difficulty, "Ridiculous! How dare you? Under this lord's control, kneel and reply." Jin Tai waved his finger, and Bai Changchun's body fell to the ground with a whoosh sound. With a loud bang, the entire Immortal Palace slightly trembled. Bai Changchun's feet sank deep into the ground, and he spat out another mouthful of blood. However, he stubbornly resisted and didn't kneel. The spectators were secretly frightened. They didn't expect Immortal Emperor Jin Tai to be so powerful. Once he got serious, Bai Changchun, who seemed to be strong earlier, didn't even have the ability to resist. In the blink of an eye, Bai Changchun's life and death were in the hands of Jin Tai. The reason why Jin Tai didn't kill him? Everyone could see that Jin Tai obviously wanted to restore his lost face in front of everyone, and he wanted to restore the supreme majesty of an immortal emperor. At this time, Jin Tai had an aloof appearance as he looked down at the people below, and he indifferently said, "Can't you borrow the power of the heaven and earth to fight against this lord? In my world, don't even think about using the power of the heaven and earth. Quickly kneel down and apologize. Maybe this lord will let you go and grant you a quick death." Yu Qianqiu, who had finally convinced Qingyang to come closer, saw this scene and his eyes widened in anger. He was about to summon his purple flames to attack Bai Changchun, but he saw two black and white yin-yang fishes coming out from Bai Changchun's body, and he couldn't help but be startled. You alone cannot decide this old man's life and death. Bai Changchun coldly snorted. The yin-yang fishes that were circling around him slowly lifted him up, and he pulled his feet out from the ground and flew towards the sky. Jin Tai's expression slightly changed, and he finally stopped putting on the smelly airs of an immortal emperor. A giant golden hand suddenly appeared behind him, and without any hesitation, it directly grabbed forward. At this time the yin-yang fishes suddenly turned into a black and white Tai Chi light ball, and Bai Changchun was protected within it. The giant golden hand grabbed both the ball and Lu Ming, and it seemed as if it wanted to directly crush them. One movement separates yin and yang like a seal, don't move the universe. Bai Changchun's sonorous voice slowly flowed between heaven and earth, and within the sonorous voice was an unending gentleness. The yin-yang Tai Chi light ball immediately began to revolve freely, and it wrapped around Bai Changchun, who was moving in a strange and slow manner. The giant golden hand was unable to grab the ball of light, and it clenched into a giant fist, and began to wildly beat at the Tai Chi light ball. A series of rumbling sounds rang out, and although the movement and momentum seemed astonishing in reality, it didn't affect Bai Changchun in the slightest. The ball of light was slippery, and no matter how powerful the fist was, the golden fist would always slide past the ball of light. Even if the fist hit the ball, it would feel as if its strength was lost, and it would be bounced back by a powerful elastic force. After a while, Jin Tai was a little angry. No matter how he attacked, no matter how much pressure he exerted, he couldn't do anything to the ball of light. In a fit of anger, he personally rushed over, punching, kicking, slashing and grabbing. He almost pounced on it and bit it with his teeth. Inside the attic, Emperor of the Underworld, Bai Qi, looked at Bai Changchun with a serious expression. He knew how powerful Jin Tai's power was, and it was several times stronger than his own. It was not easy to resist, but he didn't expect that Bai Changchun could so easily resolve it. His intuition told him that the ball of light might be some kind of treasure. Everyone looked at Bai Changchun, who didn't fight back, in surprise. Their eyes gradually became fanatical as they looked at the Tai Chi light ball. They were all trying to figure out what kind of treasure it was that could withstand such a heavy blow from immortal Emperor Jin Tai without any damage. It was undoubtedly a top-grade defensive treasure. If it fell into their hands, Jin Tai, today's battle ends here. When this old man comes again in the future, I will break your golden world and erase your name as the immortal emperor. Bai Changchun suddenly shouted coldly. He didn't have the strength to deal with his opponent. In any case, he had already achieved his goal of turning Jin Tai's wedding into a funeral. There was no point in continuing to waste time, so he drove the Tai Chi light ball to leave this place. You still want to run after entering my world? It's not that easy. Jin Tai's face became ferocious. He flashed in front of the light ball that Bai Changchun was about to leave. So what if it's your world? Bai Changchun's expression was indifferent. Could it be that your destructive power is stronger than the heavenly enchantment? This old man treads on yin and yang, creating thousands of creations, and is as unmoving as the universe. What can you do to me? If this old man wants to leave, who can stop me? What a big tone. Jin Tai sneered and waved his hand. His 5 fingers formed into a claw and grabbed the ground. The entire floating immortal palace in the sky trembled, and a big bulge appeared on the ground made of gold, growing higher and higher. Suddenly, a staff overflowing with golden light broke out of the ground and directly fell into Jin Tai's hand. Bai Changchun looked at the staff in his opponent's hand and his pupils shrank. He slowly nodded and said, "It seems that this should be your special treasure." Jin Tai didn't say a word. His staff carried the sound of wind and thunder breaking through the void. However, the result was no different from before. No matter how good his staff was, no matter how much power he exerted, it was difficult to hit the opponent. His staff always slid away. Even if he hit the opponent, the rebound force was greater. At this moment, he finally understood that the ball of light that was neither black nor white could not be destroyed by brute force. Seeing that he could not think of a way to stop the other party from escaping, he anxiously stared in the direction of the immortal palace, gritted his teeth and shouted, "Bai Qi! If we don't get rid of this monster today, he will be a threat to us in the future. How long do you want to watch the show?" It's just a hug and a kiss, yet you want me to take responsibility? You're making things too difficult for me. The naked woman said, I don't care. I've never let another man see my body. You've seen it and touched it, so you have to be responsible for me or I won't let you go. The white-clothed scholar said, what high-sounding sentiments to actually threaten me. If you have the chance to find out who I am, you will naturally know that your request is too much. The naked woman yelled, stop. A man dares to take responsibility for his actions. If you have the ability, then tell me your name. The white-clothed scholar said, I'm afraid you won't be able to bear my name. It's better if you don't know. Seeing Emperor of the Underworld Bai Qi appear, the shocked Wan Bushing suddenly heard his granddaughter murmur. He turned around and asked in a low voice, Ling, what's wrong? Do you know Emperor of the Underworld Bai Qi? Wan Ling slowly turned her head and said with a miserable expression, he is the man I told you about. Bai Qi is the man you like? Wan Bushing looked like he had swallowed a fist-sized apple. His expression was far beyond shock. Grandpa, you once said that as long as it's a man Ling truly likes, you will find a way to help Ling get him. Even if he's a married man, you will still snatch him. Wan Ling knew that it was impossible, but she still held on to some hope. Wan Bushing almost choked to death. No wonder she was his precious granddaughter. She had such a good taste. She actually chose the Emperor of the Underworld. But was Bai Qi, the Emperor of the Underworld, someone you could get just because you wanted to? He couldn't help but sigh and shake his head with a bitter smile. Grandpa never dreamed that the person you met would be him. I'm afraid Grandpa will have to go back on his words this time. Grandpa is truly powerless. Ling, you should give up on this unrealistic idea. I also didn't expect him to be the Emperor of the Underworld. Wan Ling murmured with a bitter expression. The white-clothed scholar didn't walk very far in the air when he suddenly turned around to look at Wang Qing on the roof. He calmly said, Wang Qing, standing too high isn't a good thing. There's a saying in the mortal world, the higher you stand, the more painful it will be if you fall. You better understand. Standing on the roof, Wang Qing remained unmoved. He only stared down and slowly replied, Thank you for your teachings, Emperor of the Underworld. Wang Qing will remember it. The white-clothed scholar didn't say anything else. He turned around and strode forward. His pace wasn't fast, but it was as if the ground had shrunk to an inch. In an instant he arrived in front of the two people who were in a stalemate. Bai Qi looked at the person in the ball of light and said indifferently, Bai Changchun. We meet again. Obviously, he didn't have a good impression of this old fellow who came to his underworld royal palace to cause trouble for no reason. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Bai Changchun. The incident where Bai Changchun was severely wounded by the Emperor of the Underworld in just 3 moves shook the 3 realms. Now that he met the Emperor of the Underworld again, and with immortal Emperor Jin Tai watching from the side, wasn't Bai Changchun a dead man? Not to mention them, even Yu Qianshou was extremely nervous. He didn't think that the old fellow had any chance of winning. After all, the old fellow couldn't even deal with Jin Tai, so how could he deal with both the immortal Emperor and the Emperor of the Underworld at the same time? Although he knew the Emperor of the Underworld, Bai Qi, and Bai Qi was very friendly to him, he didn't think that their relationship was good enough for Bai Qi to let go of his enemies who had come to the Underworld Royal Palace. Yu Qianshou was already holding 2 balls of purple flames in his hands. Dark clouds as black as ink had appeared in the sky at some point and were rolling over to cover them. I was thinking of coming to the Underworld Royal Palace to ask for advice when I have the chance. I didn't expect that the Emperor of the Underworld was already here. Bai Changchun looked at the 2 people, and his spirit seemed to be ignited in an instant. He said with a strong desire to fight, It seems that the Emperor of the Underworld and the Immortal Emperor are determined to keep me here. It would be impolite for me to refuse. I will risk my life to keep you company. In the distance, Yu Qianshou rolled his eyes and thought, Impolite my ass. How many lives do you have to give up? Didn't you say that no one could stop you if you wanted to leave? His brain was just normal for a while and now he was acting up again. There was really no saving him. Everyone in the world was shocked by Bai Changchun's heroic words. This guy actually wanted to fight the Emperor of the Underworld and the Immortal Emperor at the same time. While sighing with emotion, they also felt that Bai Changchun was too brave. One Immortal Emperor was enough for him. Wang Qing, who was standing on the roof of the Immortal Palace, was also shocked by Bai Changchun's words. It seemed that something was stirred up in his body, and he couldn't suppress it even if he wanted to. He stared at Bai Changchun with cold eyes. Bai Qi snorted coldly and put down his hands. He narrowed his eyes and said, Bai Changchun, as long as you submit to me, I can guarantee that you will be able to leave this place safe and sound. As soon as he said this, Jintai's eyes flashed strangely. At this moment, the sky gradually darkened. Everyone looked up and saw endless dark clouds covering the sky. It was as if a storm would come at any time, just like the situation at the scene. I will also say the same thing. Bai Changchun stared at Bai Qi with sharp eyes and said loudly, "If you want me to surrender, it's very simple. Kill me and make me fall at your feet." As soon as he said this, the sky became dark. There was not a single ray of light in the sky. The entire immortal palace was shining brightly between heaven and earth. From the darkness to the light, people could see the situation inside the glass cover more clearly. Why waste your breath on this stubborn guy? Jintai didn't give Bai Qi another chance to reply. He stared at Bai Changchun with a ferocious look in his eyes and shouted, "Then I'll fulfill your wish." The golden cloud cudgel in his hand swept through the wind and thunder. Bai Changchun didn't expect that an immortal emperor would disregard his dignity as an immortal emperor and launch a sneak attack in front of so many people. Moreover, he did it when the Emperor of the Underworld and the Emperor of the Underworld were working together to deal with him. He didn't even dream that, as a result, he was hit by the golden cloud rod and was sent flying with a bang. He couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. The Tai Chi light ball was almost destroyed in an instant. In the distance, Yu Chincho's blood was boiling and his eyes were about to pop out. How could the power of Jintai's sneak attack be weak? Fortunately, Bai Changchun's reaction was fast. The Tai Chi light ball quickly rotated to reduce the force, so he didn't suffer serious injuries. "Jintai, you despicable man!" Bai Changchun shouted angrily with blood flowing from the corner of his mouth. The world shook and it seemed that even the heavens couldn't stand it anymore. Rumble. The dark clouds in the sky began to brew countless lightning snakes. They were extremely angry and restless. Bai Qi glanced at Jintai but he didn't care. It seemed that he was already used to this kind of behavior. Jintai quickly chased after Bai Changchun with the golden cloud rod. Every strike of the rod stirred up wind and thunder, but it no longer had the effect of a sneak attack. It was simply unable to do anything to Bai Changchun. "Bai Qi, what are you waiting for? Do you want to wait for him to destroy the Dark North Palace and take your head?" Jintai's angry roar resounded through the world. Bai Qi's eyes flashed and he snorted coldly. Before Jintai could see where he was, a dense rain of fist shadows had already hit the Tai Chi light ball. The speed was frightening. Although the heavy punches couldn't break the Tai Chi light ball because they were heavy, dense, and fast, they produced a miraculous friction, and actually slowed down the rotation of the Tai Chi light ball. Jintai's eyes lit up and he shouted with joy, "Good. That's it." The golden cloud rod in his hand smashed the void on the opposite side of the countless heavy punches. Boom. The Tai Chi light ball almost collapsed. Jintai was overjoyed and swung his rod again. Inside the Tai Chi light ball, Bai Changchun shouted angrily, "Step on yin and yang, reverse the universe." Chapter 1092. He couldn't help but be furious. If it wasn't for the fact that he had cultivated the animal play and reacted faster than others, allowing the Tai Chi light ball to rotate in time to disperse the force, the consequences would be unimaginable. If it was someone else, Jintai's sneak attack would have succeeded. But then again, if it wasn't for the fact that he was trapped in the Tai Chi light ball and couldn't teleport away quickly, he might not have been injured. On the other hand, without the protection of the Tai Chi light ball, he would have died in Jintai's hands. Therefore, it was difficult to get the best of both worlds. With a deafening roar, the black and white streams of light in the Tai Chi light ball suddenly compressed from top to bottom. In a flash, a circular Tai Chi light disc was formed under Bai Changchun's feet. The entire Tai Chi light ball lost its black and white colors and became a transparent light ball. The light ball rotated, and Bai Changchun stepped on the black and white yin and yang fishes. Instantly, his figure couldn't be seen clearly, and only a green shadow could be seen spinning rapidly in the light ball. Boom! The golden cloud rod made a loud noise. Bang bang bang! Countless fist shadows hit the light ball with a momentum that could destroy everything. The fist shadows disappeared, and in an instant no one knew how many punches had been made. At this time, Bai Qi's figure slowly appeared in everyone's sight like a shadow, showing how fast he was. However, the two didn't get the result they expected, and they looked at each other in surprise. The reason was obviously related to the strange phenomenon in the light ball. Bai Qi's eyes turned cold. Although he looked like a scholar and had a good temper, as someone who sat on the Underworld Emperor's throne, how could he be a soft-hearted person? He had already made his move, and he would not stop until he achieved his goal. By Changchun. You refuse a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. Today is the day you die. Don't even think about leaving this place alive. Bai Qi coldly snorted. His elegant white robes fluttered in the wind as his killing intent surged. Break. Jin Tai didn't have so much time to talk. He just wanted to kill Bai Changchun, who was a threat in the future. He swung the golden cloud rod and hit the light ball in front of him. Bai Qi took out an ancient mirror that looked like a cattail leaf fan. The surface of the mirror was smooth and dark like stagnant water in the night, and there were complicated inscriptions engraved on it. Bai Qi's left hand skimmed across the surface of the ancient mirror, while his right hand held the handle of the ancient mirror and shone it at the ball of light that Bai Changchun was hiding in. In an instant, a jagged black light suddenly burst out from the pitch-black surface of the mirror. As it swallowed and spat, the black light exploded and instantly bombarded the ball of light. Obsidian underworld light mirror. Wan Bushing and Long Sheng exclaimed in unison. Those who knew about this mirror all gasped. It was rumored that this mirror was a treasure that the previous underworld emperors had fought over, and it could be regarded as the symbol of the previous underworld emperors. As for its origin, no one knew. In any case, it had been passed down in the underworld for a long time. It was said that the emperor of the underworld, Bai Qi, had only used the obsidian underworld light mirror twice in the past. The first time was when he fought against the demon monarch of 10,000 swords, and he relied on this mirror to resist the attack of the demon monarch of 10,000 swords, saving his life. The other time was when he was suppressing a large-scale rebellion in the underworld. Once the obsidian underworld light mirror was taken out, it immediately devoured the lives of millions of meditation cultivators. Its power was really extraordinary, but for some reason, the emperor of the underworld would never take it out unless it was a critical moment. Unexpectedly, he used it on Bai Changchun this time. At this time, under the joint attack of the emperor of the underworld and the immortal emperor, the heaven and earth changed color. The entire immortal palace was shaking violently as if it was going to fall from the sky at any time. The loud rumbling drowned out all the sounds in the world, and even the roaring thunder in the sky was drowned out. Everyone sighed endlessly. The immortal emperor took out the golden cloud rod, and the emperor of the underworld took out the obsidian underworld light mirror. Both of them took out their special treasures. These two immortal and underworld supremes were obviously determined to kill Bai Changchun no matter what. Yu Qianzhou's eyes were about to split open. He no longer cared whether Bai Changchun would blame him or not, and he forcefully held the two purple flames in his palms. In an instant, the sky seemed to be blown up by the thunder and the dark clouds. Bang bang bang. Countless thunder illuminated the world, and crazily struck the immortal palace floating in the sky. Bang bang bang. The glittering light spots that were as dense as a series of cannons were isolated on the glazed light shield that wrapped around the immortal palace. Wave after wave of continuous attacks immediately showed an unusually terrifying and magnificent strange scene, which was extremely spectacular. However, although it looked beautiful, it seemed to be a little less powerful. The glazed light shield was not moved at all. The sudden appearance of the strange phenomenon made everyone feel strange. How could there be such dense and continuous thunder? It was obviously not a natural phenomenon, but someone was driving it with a great technique. He suddenly discovered that every time he and Jin Tai attacked, the Tai Chi light under Bai Changchun's feet would become more solid, as if it was collecting the energy from their attacks. By now, the Tai Chi light seemed to have become solid, and it was as smooth as a real object. Who knew how much energy it had accumulated? A terrifying thought flashed through Bai Qi's mind, and he quickly retracted the black light from the obsidian light mirror. He raised his hand and shouted, "We've been tricked. Jin Tai, stop." Jin Tai knew that Bai Qi wouldn't say something like this for no reason, so he quickly stopped and looked at him in confusion. Suddenly, everyone found that Bai Changchun, who was standing on the Tai Chi disc in the ball of light, had stopped. He suddenly opened his eyes, which were full of vigor, and a sonorous cold snort resounded through the sky. "Kintai, open your eyes and watch this old man break your golden world." His green robe swelled up as if it was filled with air, and the light ball outside quickly retracted into the Tai Chi light under his feet. His palms, which were on his lower abdomen, pushed to the left and right as fast as lightning. The black and white yin-yang fishes under his feet separated in an instant, splitting into yin and yang at the speed of lightning. Two bright light shadows shot towards the two people on the left and right. "Ah, not good." Feeling the terrifying power contained in the two inconspicuous light shadows, Jin Tai and Bai Qi exclaimed at the same time, and almost subconsciously used the treasures in their hands to block. The obsidian light mirror in Bai Chi's hand suddenly burst out a powerful black light to kill the incoming white light, and the golden cloud rod in Jin Tai's hand instantly swelled to the size of a pillar, blocking himself. In the explosion of the strong light, Bai Chi looked up to the sky and spat out a mouthful of blood. He desperately controlled the ancient mirror to block the remaining power of the opponent's attack, but he was still sent flying. Kim Tae, along with the golden pillar, was also sent flying. Everyone only saw two powerful balls of light, one black and one white, explode rapidly. The glazed light barrier that enveloped the immortal palace rapidly expanded and collapsed. Then they heard a terrifying explosion that shook the heavens and the earth, almost deafening everyone. The people who were watching the show around were all blown away by the powerful shockwave. Fortunately, the glazed light shield first reduced most of the powerful impact, otherwise there would be a lot of casualties outside. Everyone stabilized their bodies and looked back again, only to see the sky full of golden dust flying, under the light of the setting sun, colorful and beautiful. Suddenly, hundreds of mountains around the immortal palace exploded, and the earth trembled violently. Those who had experience immediately judged that the foundation supporting the immortal palace to float in the air had all collapsed. Not good. The immortal palace is about to fall. Below the immortal palace there were screams everywhere. Countless streams of light desperately tried to escape. A huge black shadow rapidly descended from the sky and smashed down with a boom. The earth shook, and some people who didn't react in time were immediately suppressed under it. After many people fled to the distance, they couldn't help but look back and want to see what the falling immortal palace looked like, but the smoke and dust were everywhere, and they couldn't see anything clearly. Then he heard the endless sounds of fighting from inside. The powerful air wave instantly dispersed the dust in the surroundings. The once glorious immortal palace was now slightly tilting on the huge hillside. The majestic golden palace had already been mostly destroyed. The golden palace that was originally 100 meters tall was only left with a few meters of crumbled walls that were twisted and hideous in front of everyone's eyes. Chapter 1093. The immortal palace was destroyed like this? Everyone was dumbfounded. In the air, Ji Wu, who had escaped in time when the immortal palace fell, held Yi Shuejuan with one hand and played with Lu Yanqing's arm with the other. Nie Shaoqian and the 6 great commanders were also floating in the air, looking at the battle below with pale faces. The 3 terrifying fellows were once again fighting to the death. It wasn't something that they, the so-called experts, could interfere in. Although they were usually regarded as experts in the celestial world, they were not worth mentioning at all in the eyes of the 3 people below. Any one of them could kill them in seconds. So even if they wanted to help the celestial emperor, they were powerless. What's more, some people were already looking at them suspiciously. No one knew what they were thinking. These people were still alive, but Wang Qing, who was standing high on the roof of the immortal palace, was missing. The sounds of fighting below stopped after a while. There was no other reason. Bai Changchun had formed another ball of light and was hiding inside it, stepping on the Tai Chi light disc. The gentle and elegant emperor of the underworld Bai Chi's white robe was messy, and his snow-white clothes were stained with his own blood. His image was greatly reduced. Immortal Emperor Jin Tai was not much better. The golden crown on his head was lost again and his hair was messy. One of them was holding the obsidian underworld light mirror, and the other was holding the golden cloud rod. They looked at Bai Changchun in the light ball and gritted their teeth. However, they did not dare to make a move. They had almost lost their lives, so they did not dare to be fooled again. In fact, if it were not for the treasures in their hands, they would have been removed from the immortal realm in the netherworld. The 2 of them were scared when they thought about it. Bai Changchun, what's the use of hiding inside? If you have the ability, come out and fight to the death with me. Jin Tai pointed the golden cloud rod in his hand. He could not hide the anger on his face. Not only was the immortal palace destroyed, but his reputation in the immortal realm was also ruined. Moreover, it happened on his happy day. He had countless reasons to be angry. Despicable people are not worthy of talking to me openly. Bai Changchun snorted disdainfully. He looked around at the 2 people and said indifferently, "Your heads will be temporarily placed on your necks. I will come back to take them in the future." The meaning behind his words was clear. He was leaving. He knew in his heart that with his current strength, he wouldn't be able to do anything to these 2 even if he stayed behind. It was impossible for him to borrow their strength to attack. The 2 of them wouldn't be able to take advantage of him again, so there was no point in wasting time. However, how could Jin Tai and Bai Chi be willing to let this fellow, whose cultivation was progressing at a godly speed, leave in vain? If they let him go today, it was indeed possible that he would come to take their heads in the future, just like he said. The two of them subconsciously blocked his way, but they didn't know what to do. It seemed like there was no better way than to talk. Could they kill someone with words? Jintai was not willing to let him go like this. He could only shout dryly, "Stop. So what if I stand still? What can you do to me?" Bai Changchun's cold eyes swept over and he snorted with extreme disdain, "Ridiculous." He flew up with the ball and was about to leave. At this moment an indifferent voice was heard, "Brother Bai, please wait for a moment." The three people who had fought fiercely without a clear winner turned their heads to look at the same time. They saw a figure in a blue robe walking out from the broken golden palace door. The most eye-catching thing was the silver mask. Who else could it be other than the Heartless Palace's sect master Wang Qing? Wang Qing stood outside the broken golden palace door with an indifferent expression and looked at the three people calmly. The fresh mountain breeze after the battle blew over. The loose blue robe swayed and the long hair behind the silver mask danced in the wind. He walked out from the ruins of the battle and stood there quietly. He gave off an otherworldly feeling. His hands were gently crossed on his lower abdomen. The three of them couldn't help but frown. They all felt a strange feeling from him. It was as if it wasn't the three of them who fought just now but him, Wang Qing. After experiencing the fierce battle just now, he had been reborn. It was this indescribable strange feeling. Oh, it's the sect master Wang Qing of the Heartless Palace. Bai Changchun didn't dare to underestimate this person because he had felt the dangerous aura from him before. He asked, "I wonder what sect master Wang Qing has to teach me?" "Brother Bai, you are too kind." Wang Qing's blue robe fluttered in the mountain breeze. He said in a flat tone, "I've been fortunate enough to witness Brother Bai's heroic spirit in battle. How can I not express my gratitude to Brother Bai now that the demons in my heart that have troubled me for so many years have been removed?" Bai Changchun was stunned. He looked at him up and down again and nodded thoughtfully. Sect leader Wang Qing is too polite. On the path of cultivation, some things will come naturally. Even if others help you dig a path out of the ground, if you don't have enough foundation like water to flow smoothly, how can it become a canal? There is no need to say thank you to an outsider. Goodbye. Stepping on yin and yang, reversing the universe. Once this method was used, even the Emperor of the Underworld and the Immortal Emperor were helpless. I really admire you. Wang Qing looked at Bai Changchun's back and said lightly, "Wang Qing is not talented. I have comprehended the sixth move of the sword drawing style by chance, but I have never tried it. I didn't expect to see Brother Bai's unbreakable method today. I'm really excited." As soon as he said that, everyone was taken aback. Wang Qing had actually comprehended the sixth move of the sword drawing style. How powerful would it be? What shocked everyone the most was that Wang Qing's words were clearly to challenge Bai Changchun. Did he really think that the sixth move of the sword drawing style could break the method that even the Emperor of the Underworld and the Immortal Emperor couldn't break? The sixth move of the sword drawing style. Bai Changchun suddenly turned around and stared at Wang Qing. He vaguely guessed that the source of the aura that made him feel dangerous before was probably the sixth move of the sword drawing style. He asked, "You want to challenge me?" What a joke. Jintai laughed loudly. In fact, he felt insulted. He was an immortal emperor and the Emperor of the Underworld working together couldn't break the great method, but this Wang Qing actually challenged Bai Changchun at this time. It was clear that Wang Qing thought that he was stronger than him. Wasn't this a public slap to his face? He immediately shouted, "Wang Qing, you are just a defeated opponent of mine, how dare you speak so shamelessly here? The grievances between the three of us are not for you to interfere." Bai Chi's eyes flashed as he stared at Wang Qing. Wang Qing didn't seem to hear Jintai's words at all. He looked at Bai Changchun and said indifferently, "I am not challenging you. Brother Bai and Wang Qing are both late-stage immortal emperors, but Brother Bai fought the Emperor of the Underworld and the immortal emperors by himself. I think the three of you must have consumed a lot of your cultivation in this fierce battle." Wang Qing didn't think that if he challenged Brother Bai alone or learned from Brother Bai to challenge the Emperor of the Underworld and the immortal emperors, he would be at an advantage. "I really don't want to take advantage of this, so I want to challenge all three of you at the same time." Bai Qi, Jintai, and Bai Changchun glanced at each other and thought that they had heard wrongly. However, from their expressions, they could see that everyone heard the same unbelievable words. The surroundings were silent. Wang Qing actually wanted to challenge the Emperor of the Underworld, the immortal emperors, and Bai Changchun at the same time. Was he frightened by the battle just now? Only one person's expression was different from the others. It was the mythical Fire Palace's sect master Huijun, Huxiaozi, who personally created the six-dragon snow blue sword. His expression was slightly excited. He also wanted to see how much power the sword he spent tens of thousands of years to create would be in the hands of Wang Qing. Wang Qing's eyes under the silver mask had already slowly closed, ignoring the gazes of the crowd. His long hair fluttered down his back, and his blue robe was as calm as still water. A thick murderous intent lingered around his body, condensing and not dispersing as if it was real. He stood there straight like a sword stuck there. At this time Wang Qing didn't seem like he was Wang Qing but a sword. After Jintai was stunned, he suddenly burst into a monstrous laughter. His heart was filled with anger. He didn't expect that in one day he would depreciate to such an extent. Someone just came out and wanted to bully him. This was really seeing a ghost. The previous Bai Changchun was fine, but now even this loser jumped out to humiliate him. If he didn't set up the array, how could he bear it? How could he rule the entire immortal world in the future? The golden cloud rod in his hand pointed at Wang Qing and shouted angrily, "Wang Qing! How dare you? Good. I will fulfill your wish. There is no need for the two of them. Today I will let you understand what it means to live a life worse than death." Wang Qing's eyes suddenly opened, shining with a bright light. The two sword-shaped eyes actually made a slight sound in the air and pierced towards Jintai. Jintai was slightly shocked. He didn't dare to look directly at it and slightly tilted his head to avoid it. What a strong sword intent, Bai Qi said with a cold breath. Bai Changchun didn't say anything. The light ball protecting him had already begun to spin faster. Suddenly Wang Qing's hands on his abdomen finally moved. It was fine if he didn't move, but once he moved, everything in the world would disappear. Hum. A sonorous sword sound reverberated between heaven and earth, shocking everyone's mind. A dazzling snow blue light was pulled out by Wang Qing, and with an unbelievable speed, it directly swept towards the three people in front of him. In an instant, the entire Paradise Immortal realm erupted with the most dazzling light in the entire immortal world. The soul-stirring snow blue light painted with confusion and desolation was so magnificent and enchanting that even the setting sun felt ashamed of its inferiority. At this moment, there was nothing that could cover up this dazzling blooming light. The powerful black light that erupted from the obsidian light mirror in Bai Qi's hand was directly forced back by the sweeping snow blue light. The obsidian light mirror crazily expanded and blocked in front of him. Boom! A sword mark was left on the surface of the mirror forever, and the unparalleled power directly knocked Bai Qi and the mirror away, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood. Boom! The golden cloud rod in front of Kinta couldn't block the snow blue light and was directly broken into two pieces. Ah! Kinta let out a blood-curdling screech as he was directly turned into golden powder by the snow blue light. Boom! The sphere of light that was protecting Bai Changchun blocked the snow blue light. However, it only managed to block it for a short while before the sphere of light collapsed. Bai Changchun looked up to the sky and spat out a mouthful of blood as he was sent flying. Chapter 1094. Everyone only felt that the world was covered in a snowy blue color and nothing else could be seen. After 3 loud bangs, the dazzling snowy blue light suddenly disappeared. The surroundings were still the same as before. Compared to before, they could not see any place that had suffered from a violent attack. They did not even feel any large fluctuations in the air. After 3 loud bangs, the snowy blue light disappeared and there was no more movement. Almost everyone did not see clearly what had happened. It was hard to imagine that Wang Qing had already made a move. However, the scream that came from Jintai's mouth did not seem fake. The most terrifying thing was that not only did Emperor of the Underworld Bai Qi and Bai Changchun fly far away, there was also a dark red mark at the corner of their mouths. They were slowly climbing up from the ground as if they had been seriously injured. Jintai's golden cloud rod was broken into 2 pieces on the ground. Where did Jintai go after that scream? Everyone looked at Wang Qing, who had brazenly pulled out a snowy blue light, in bewilderment. A huge sword with an extraordinary aura and a strange shape stood at the place where Wang Qing had just stood. It was a full 5 meters long, sparkling and translucent snowy blue. The sword hilt was formed by 6 flying dragons, and the entire huge sword was surrounded by flowing lights. Such a huge sword? Everyone was shocked. Bai Qi and Bai Changchun, who had been injured by the sword, had solemn expressions as they looked at the sword. One look and they could tell that this sword was extraordinary. Ing-ing, the sound of the sword rang out, and the huge sword was slowly inserted into the ground. As the snowy blue huge sword disappeared, Wang Qing, who was standing behind the huge sword, gradually appeared in front of everyone. After the sword was inserted into the golden ground, the sword hilt, which was formed by 6 flying dragons, was just in front of Wang Qing. The eyes behind the silver mask were still indifferent. His hands were crossed on his abdomen, unmoving as if nothing had happened. However, at this moment he made everyone feel a huge invisible pressure. The sect leader of the mythical fire palace, Wu Jun, looked at the huge sword inserted into the golden ground and was extremely excited. Wang Qing had indeed not let down his efforts. At this moment, dense dark clouds rolled in from all directions, accompanied by the sound of thunder. A majestic and vast chi floated and vibrated between heaven and earth. Everyone quickly looked around the sky and they were all slightly shocked. This movement had already begun to form the Dharma of heaven and earth, and it was obvious that someone was controlling it. Under the golden umbrella, Qingyang's eyes flashed as she looked at Yu Qianqiu. In actuality, when the furious lightning struck the immortal palace, she faintly suspected that it had something to do with Yu Qianqiu. In the end, she saw Yu Qianqiu looking around in shock, as if he didn't know what was going on either. Yu Qianqiu truly didn't know what was going on, because this commotion wasn't caused by him at all. Even if he did, with his current cultivation, he wouldn't be able to cause such a huge commotion. To be able to summon such a vast dark cloud, he was still far from being able to do so. The most important thing was that he had secretly attacked Jin Taishan without knowing the immensity of heaven and earth. As a result, Jin Taishuan's counterattack made him understand that there were some levels of fighting that he could not intervene in with his little cultivation. He was heavily injured on the spot, but he didn't show it. Now, he was silently recovering, and there was no way he could forcefully use his cultivation to do anything. Brother Bai, could it be that you still want to put up a futile resistance? Wang Qing calmly looked at Bai Changchun and said, the lightning that Brother Bai summoned couldn't even break through the barrier of the immortal palace. Do you really think it can do anything to me? He also mistakenly thought that the heavenly lightning that struck the barrier was summoned by Bai Changchun. When everyone heard this, they saw golden arcs of light flashing around Bai Changchun's body, faintly drawing in the majestic and vast chi between heaven and earth. At this time, the dark cloud with countless lightning snakes in the sky plunged the earth into darkness again. Bai Changchun didn't explain that he wasn't the one who caused the lightning. He just snorted and said, Sect leader Wang Qing's sword drawing style is indeed worthy of its reputation. It can actually condense such a powerful force into a single line in an instant without any leakage. On the contrary, I feel that this trip wasn't in vain. Wang Qing said indifferently, although it's my first time meeting Brother Bai, I feel like old friends at first sight. From today onwards, the immortal world will belong to my heartless palace. I heard that Brother Bai has always been a loner. Why don't you join my heartless palace? I promise I won't restrict Brother Bai's freedom. What does Brother Bai think? Everyone was shocked when they heard this. The Heartless Palace was the #1 sect in the celestial world. Now that Wang Qing had displayed his valiant strength and killed Celestial Emperor Jin Tai, it was just as Wang Qing had said, the celestial world was indeed going to belong to the Heartless Palace. At this point, Bai Changchun shouldn't refuse such a temptation. If Wang Qing and Bai Changchun joined forces, perhaps even Emperor of the Underworld Bai Qi would be in danger. Bai Qi quickly glanced at the two of them warily. Suddenly, a burst of laughter echoed throughout the ruined immortal palace. He said, "What a joke. How can the immortal world belong to your heartless palace when I'm still here? What a fool's dream." Jin Tai. Bai Qi exclaimed and looked around in surprise. Bai Changchun also looked around in shock. The others didn't see it clearly, but the two of them saw with their own eyes that Jin Tai was killed by Wang Qing's sword. How could he still be alive? There was a sudden uproar in the surroundings. Nie Xiaoqian and the others, who were secretly preparing to escape, immediately became spirited. They saw the hope of turning the tables again. Among them, Wu Xiong's face was gloomy. Ji Wu and Er Xuejuan's faces frowned. Jin Tai's survival was beyond everyone's expectations. Even Wang Qing's usually calm eyes flashed with surprise as he looked around vigilantly. Beside Emperor of the Underworld Bai Qi, a golden light shone on the ground. The well-dressed Jin Tai suddenly rose from it. He opened his hand, and the two halves of the golden cloud rod immediately fused together. In the blink of an eye, the two halves returned to their original state and flashed into Jin Tai's hand. "Are you really Jin Tai? You really didn't die?" Bai Qi was overjoyed and asked. Although the two of them were usually at odds, they always relied on and supported each other at critical moments. This was beneficial for the two of them to rule the immortal world and the netherworld. The others were also examining the new immortal emperor Jin Tai. In the distance, Yu Qianqiu revealed a thoughtful expression as he pondered about the matter of Jin Ling. I've already cultivated the immortal golden body. It's a big joke to want to kill me. I'm just temporarily avoiding the blade. Jin Tai glanced at Bai Qi and stared at Wang Qing. He sneered and said, Wang Qing, others don't know your details. Do you think you can fool me who has fought with you before? Your sword drawing style consumes a lot of cultivation. After the same style is used, you need at least 6 hours to recondense your essence, qi and spirit before you can use it again. The same style can't be used continuously. The first 5 styles of the sword drawing style are simply child's play for the 3 of us. Are you trying to delay time here? Ah, so that's how it is. Everyone was suddenly enlightened and thought that Wang Qing was going to be unlucky this time. Even Emperor of the Underworld Bai Qi touched the sword mark on the obsidian light mirror and stared coldly at Wang Qing. However, Wang Qing still stood there without worry or fear. His gaze was indifferent as he said, This is indeed a problem. The shackles of the sword drawing style made me not dare to act rashly before. I have been looking for a solution for many years. However, once I give up the powerful power of the sword drawing style, the sword drawing style becomes meaningless. Speaking of which, I have to thank the 3 of you for the fierce battle, which made Wang Qing have a new understanding in an instant. Even if you can draw the sword continuously, I want to see how many times you can withstand the consumption of the sword drawing style with your cultivation. Jin Tai pointed the golden cloud rod in his hand and said with a hideous smile, Today I will take your little life to correct the rules of the celestial world. I will let the world know the consequences of disrespecting the ruler as a warning to others. Why do I need to draw the sword a few more times? 1 sword is enough. Wang Qing said lightly, Jin Tai, I don't believe that you can really keep your golden body indestructible under the 7th style of the sword drawing style. I will wait and see. There is a 7th style of the sword drawing style. There was an uproar in the surroundings. How powerful would it be? Bai Changchun frowned slightly, Bai Qi's pupils shrank suddenly, and Jin Tai's expression was slightly stiff. Only he knew whether he could really keep his golden body indestructible or not. Brother Bai, I will ask you for the last time. Wang Qing looked at Bai Changchun calmly and said word by word, Are you willing to join my heartless palace? Bai Changchun, don't listen to his bewitchment, he is making a last-ditch struggle. Without waiting for Bai Changchun to answer, Qin Tai resolutely continued, As long as you and I stand on the same side and kill this evil together, I will now guarantee in front of the world that I will let bygones be bygones for everything you have done today. He said that Wang Qing was making a last-ditch struggle, but in turn he pulled Bai Changchun to deal with Wang Qing together. It could be said that he showed his capricious side without a doubt. Everyone couldn't help but ask themselves, how could they dare to believe such a despicable person? How can I miss the opportunity to experience the 7th style of the sword drawing style of sect leader Wang Qing? As soon as these words came out, everyone was stunned. Even Bai Qi looked at Bai Changchun with some surprise. He didn't expect that Bai Changchun would be so obsessed that he would believe Jin Tai's nonsense. Who knew that in the blink of an eye, Bai Changchun pointed at Jin Tai and shouted angrily, Jin Tai, you despicable person, do you think that I am a fool who can be easily fooled? This old man will not miss the 7th style of the sword drawing style. This old man will also take your dog head in the future. The meaning of his words was very clear. He would not rely on anyone, nor would he ally with anyone. Jin Tai's expression twisted, and he immediately turned hostile and said, You will live through today first. He secretly communicated with Bai Qi, and a black light and a golden light attacked almost at the same time, launching a sneak attack on Wang Qing. Swoosh swoosh swoosh. 6 consecutive sword cries seemed to combine into one. 6 silhouettes of hands grabbed the 6 dragons on the hilt of the 6 dragon snow blue sword and pulled it out at the same time. The huge sword immediately turned into 6 dazzling blue lights. 6 shadows of hands appeared in front of Wang Qing, and at the same time they pulled out the sword. It was as if there were 6 divine dragons imprisoned in his hands, and when he waved his hands, the 6 majestic dragons immediately roared and flew out. Chapter 1095. Roar. 6 dragons roared at the same time, shaking the heaven and earth. 6 giant dragons shining with a snowy blue light attacked at the same time with an earth-shattering momentum. Bang! Bang! With 2 loud bangs, the black light from the obsidian light mirror was directly dispersed, the golden cloud cudgel was bounced off, and the 6 giant dragons attacked at the same time. The 2 swift sneak attacks were instantly destroyed. The 2 huge snow-blue dragons chased after the 2 attackers in an imposing manner, as if they could devour the 2 of them in one gulp. Bai Qi and Jin Tai were shocked, and they teleported away at the same time. When they appeared again, the golden cloud cudgel was as thick as a pillar, and the obsidian light mirror was as big as a hammer. I don't believe that your broken sword can be stronger than the 10,000 swords of the demonic monarch of swords. Jin Tai's angry roar overshadowed the thunder. The 2 could become the supreme swordsmen of the immortal realm and the netherworld, so they were not cowards who could be easily scared off. Both of them shouted angrily at the same time. The golden and white silhouettes turned around and faced the 2 dragons that were chasing after them. Their clubs and hammers were smashed, and the rumbling sounds shook the heavens. The 2 men and the 2 dragons were engaged in a fierce battle. On the high platform, Wang Qing's eyes under the silver mask emitted a sharp light like a sword. His thin and long body under the wide blue robe stood straight with his hands behind his back. He hadn't moved a single step. The 4 dragons flying around him were vivid and lifelike, which shocked everyone. They didn't expect Wang Qing to be so powerful. Those with great vision would be able to see that these dragons were formed by the huge sword that had been divided into several parts. The dragon bodies that could be seen were because the sword will was so strong that it had reached the stage where the sword energy was like a rainbow and the Dharma of heaven and earth took shape. The most shocking thing was that only 2 of the 6 sword dragons could entangle the Emperor of the Underworld and the Celestial Emperor. It was really powerful. However, what surprised everyone was that Wang Qing didn't attack Bai Changchun. Even Bai Changchun felt it was strange that Wang Qing still wanted to win him over. What everyone didn't know was that Wang Qing's one sword 6 styles had just begun to form a divine ability, and it was a bit difficult for him to use it against 3 experts at the same time. Therefore he didn't attack Bai Changchun but Jin Tai and Bai Qi to practice. It wouldn't be too late to attack after he had mastered it. He was certain that Bai Changchun was a proud and aloof person. If he went easy on him, Bai Changchun would definitely not join forces with the other 2 to deal with him. He only needed to buy some time to familiarize himself with him. The fierce battle in the sky did not stop. Loud noises shook the sky. The 2 flying dragons were like 2 snow-blue storms, wrapping around the 2 and attacking rapidly. Jin Tai suddenly transmitted his voice, "Bai Qi, since you are fast, why don't you find an opportunity to launch a sneak attack and break his sword drawing style? By then he will definitely die." Bai Qi glanced at Wang Qing, who was as still as a mountain, and saw that there were still 4 flying dragons circling around him. Bai Qi could not help but feel angry and annoyed. Just one of them would take a lot of effort and now he had to deal with 5 at the same time. Wasn't he just looking for trouble? Immediately, he sneered and transmitted his voice back, "Help me lure 2 flying swords away from him first." What he meant was that they would each deal with 3 flying swords and no one would suffer a loss. Jin Tai immediately shut his mouth. If he dared to run over, he was afraid that he would not just lure 2 flying swords away but 4 flying swords. However, Jin Tai and Bai Qi weren't to be trifled with. It was a bit of a stretch for the 2 wyverns to try and stop them. By the time the 2 gradually let go of their attacks, the 2 wyverns had already been beaten back to their original forms. With Jin Tai's cunning, he immediately realized that something was wrong. In such a situation, Wang Qing still did not release the other 4 flying swords to win. It was not that he did not want to but that he could not. Jin Tai immediately shouted, "Bai Changchun, he can't control 6 swords at the same time. Why don't you take the opportunity while we are holding him back to kill this thief?" Now that things had come to this, Bai Changchun also faintly thought of this possibility. However, how could he do something like taking advantage of others' difficulties? He coldly snorted and said, "Shameless. How dare you point your fingers at this old man? You." Jin Tai hatefully shut his mouth. He did not want to have another enemy now. At this time, the unmoving eyes of Wang Qing suddenly burst out with an even brighter splendor. He indifferently said, "Jin Tai, I will satisfy your request. I will let you have a taste of 6 swords." The blue robe waved his large sleeves and 2 fingers stabbed out with the driving sword technique. Roar! The 4 snow-blue flying dragons shone with blue light under the inky black clouds. They roared angrily and their huge bodies wriggled. With a loud bang, they split into 2 and shot towards Jin Tai and Bai Qi. Just one flying dragon was not easy to deal with for the 2 of them. If they continued to fight, they would simply be courting death. Jin Tai did not expect that he would make a wrong judgment. He angrily shouted, "Go!" With a wave of his staff that could shake the mountains and rivers, he pushed back the entangling flying dragons and teleported away. Bai Qi also quickly escaped. Although the 6 flying dragons were strong, they did not have the nimbleness of the flying swords. They were too much of a burden. Before they could catch up to the 2, they immediately returned and flew around Wang Qing. No one thought that this would be the result. Bai Qi and Jin Tai were actually chased away by Wang Qing. Such a subversive thing was hard for everyone to accept. The people of the Immortal Palace were terrified. They did not think that the Immortal Emperor would abandon them and run away. Nie Xiaoqian flashed to the side of Yu Qianzhou and Qingyang and anxiously said, "Quickly, follow mother. When the tree falls, the monkeys scatter." Even Jin Tai ran away. "Where else can we go?" Qingyang self-deprecatingly sneered. Looking around, they found that the surrounding people were looking at them with evil intentions. Fortunately, Jin Tai and Bai Qi were still alive and did not see the final result. For the time being, no one dared to do anything to them. Most importantly, at this time, Wang Qing was completely focused on Bai Changchun. He did not care about the remaining people of the Immortal Palace. The sky was dark and the clouds were filled with lightning. "Let's go to the underworld. There are many experts there. It is the territory of the Emperor of the Underworld. We still have a chance to make a comeback." Nie Xiaoqian cautiously looked around and whispered. Qingyang frowned and closed the golden umbrella in her hand. She returned it to Yu Qianzhou and said, "You have the Immortal Palace's golden umbrella. Plus, you have enmity with the Heartless Palace. They won't let you go. Come with us to the underworld." Yu Qianzhou held the golden umbrella and looked at Bai Changchun. He slightly shook his head and said, "It is not the end yet. I still want to see how it will turn out. If you don't leave now, you won't be able to leave when the outcome is decided." Qingyang reminded. "It's fine if he doesn't want to leave." Nie Xiaoqian directly dragged Qingyang away. She couldn't care less about Yu Qianzhou's life at this time of great change. Pulling Qingyang to Ji Wu's side, Nie Xiaoqian clasped her hands together and said, "Immortal Empress, please come with us to the underworld to meet with the Immortal Emperor." Ji Wu finally had a chance to escape from Jin Tai's evil claws. How could she take the initiative to be trampled on? She coldly shouted, "He left me behind and ran away. Is there a need for me to stick to him?" Nie Xiaoqian paused. She naturally knew that Ji Wu didn't want to marry the Immortal Emperor. If there was a chance, Ji Wu would definitely not leave with her. At this moment she couldn't use force. She could only say, "Immortal Empress, take care." She grabbed Qingyang and the 6 great commanders and quickly left. It was just as Lady Qingyang had said, when the tree falls, the monkeys scatter. When the disciples of the Immortal Palace saw that their masters were either killed or fled, those with higher cultivations who could keep up with them also ran away, while those with lower cultivations immediately scattered in all directions. The huge Immortal Palace collapsed in an instant. However, the strange thing was that the External Affairs Commander, Wu Xiong, didn't leave with Nie Xiaoqian's group. Instead, he flashed to the top right of Wang Qing and solemnly said, "Big brother, when the underworld found out that you were going to cut off all means of retreat during Jin Tai's wedding, they immediately made preparations in advance. When they received the news of Jin Tai's defeat, they immediately attacked the Dark North Royal Palace. Who would have thought that Bai Qi would also be here and would be defeated by you together with Jin Tai? This is good, we don't need to be afraid of their alliance. You alone can deal with both of them. Big brother, you should immediately go to the underworld and help father and auntie." As soon as he said this, everyone was shocked. Wu Xiong actually called Wang Qing big brother. Who were their father and aunt? Why did they want to attack the Dark North Imperial Palace? Could it be that Wu Xiong and Wang Qing were brothers? Could it be that someone had been accumulating power to overthrow Jin Tai and Bai Qi? "I know what to do. Get out of the way," Wang Qing shouted. He stared at the slightly surprised Bai Changchun and said word by word, "Brother Bai, Wang Qing will give you one last chance. Are you going to join my Heartless Palace or not?" The flying dragons flying around him became more and more ferocious. Wu Xiong frowned and quickly dodged to the side. He went to the side to appease his shocked subordinates and ordered them to go to the various mountains of the Paradise Wonderland to collect the wealth left by the Immortal Palace. Many people were envious when they heard this, but most of them came alone. Moreover, no one dared to compete with these 2 brothers for the wealth left by the Immortal Palace. This old man is not a person who fawns on the rich and powerful. Bai Changchun slowly floated into the air and flatly refused, This old man wants to see how powerful the seventh move of the sword drawing style is. Hearing this, everyone couldn't help but sigh. They all felt that this Bai Changchun was a little tactless. Yu Qianqiu almost fainted when he heard this. This old man is really crazy. You can't even withstand the sixth move of the sword drawing style and you want to withstand the seventh move? Didn't you see that Bai Qi and Jin Tai were scared away? Brother Bai, you are digging your own grave. Wang Qing said calmly. That's not necessarily true. Bai Changchun, who was in the air, said in a cadence, your sixth move is superior in terms of purity, and 1. The explosive speed is so fast that I can't neutralize the power of that move with my current understanding. If you can use the sixth move now, this old man can only run away. As for the seventh move, it is indeed several times more powerful than the sixth move. Unfortunately, it is a little mixed. With this old man's understanding of power, I don't think it can do anything to me. Since I can't make you change your mind, what's the point of keeping you alive? The 6 flying snow blue dragons around Wang Qing immediately roared in the sky. Clap. Bai Changchun clapped his palms together in the air and closed his eyes. His lips moved and his green robe fluttered in the wind. A sonorous sound flowed slowly between heaven and earth. Ignore the common people, ignore the ghosts and gods, and don't touch karma. Close your eyes, cover your ears, and dry your heart. Only seek the dragon crouching technique. Chapter 1096. The bleak tone in his voice revealed his persistent pursuit of endless bitter cultivation. The road was long and arduous, and he would continue to search for it. The mood in just 2 sentences made everyone's mind slightly stunned, and they looked back and sighed with emotion on the path of cultivation in this life. As the words flowed, the clouds in all directions moved, and the rolling dark clouds in the sky surged rapidly. Thunder rumbled one after another, and the momentum from all directions surged and condensed towards Bai Changchun, who was floating in the air. A mighty heaven and earth Dharma idol seemed to want to help him. Close your eyes, cover your ears, dry your heart, and only seek the dragon subduing technique. I want to see how Brother Bai will subdue Wang Qing's 6 dragons' snow blue sword. Wang Qing snorted, waved the big sleeves of his blue robe, and stabbed towards Bai Changchun with 2 fingers. In an instant the sky and the earth changed color. The 6 dragons roared loudly and shook the sky. Their huge snow-blue bodies, which were like rainbows, smashed through the air and shot towards Bai Changchun, who closed his eyes and put his palms together. The rolling and powerful air waves immediately forced the onlookers to retreat again, not daring to get close. Bai Changchun's eyes suddenly opened, and his palms that were put together loosened. He waved the big sleeves of his green robe, and his whole body soared into the sky with a whoosh. He shot straight into the sky with a stream of light, and instantly rushed into the rolling dark clouds with bursts of thunder. At the moment when the dark clouds were smashed open, countless thunderbolts could be seen crisscrossing and shining like a net. The 6 dreamy flying dragons shining with snow-blue light all turned and chased after him. The 6 dragons surrounded and soared into the sky, and their momentum was astonishing. Bang! With a loud bang, the dark clouds in the sky were dyed into a large area of green light by the sudden burst of thunderbolts. Thousands of thunderbolts fell at the same time, and with a boom, they concentrated on the heads of the 6 flying dragons, causing the huge bodies of the 6 flying dragons to freeze. Everyone sucked in a breath of cold air. They could feel the electric currents spreading through the air, and the hairs on their bodies stood on end without being able to suppress it. Wang Qing's eyes suddenly narrowed. He could feel that the thunderbolt that descended this time was obviously much more powerful than the thunderbolt that struck the immortal palace earlier. He couldn't help but ask himself, could it be that this old thing has been hiding his strength all along? Yu Qianqiu, on the other hand, was left speechless. He realized that the old man was much stronger than him when it came to controlling thunder and lightning. He recalled the legend of the old man being able to capture thunder and lightning and use it as the heavenly sword. He had thought that it was just a flattering compliment from others who were intimidated by the old man's despotic power. But now, it seemed that the old man was a true expert in controlling thunder and lightning. Just as he was about to take a good look at the technique of controlling lightning, a few people suddenly appeared. At first glance, Ji Wu was supporting Immortal Crocodile and Lu Yanqing to his side. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but glance at his own Immortal Emperor-style golden robe, then at Ji Wu's golden robe, and found that the 2 of them standing together were a little too eye-catching. After Ji Wu noticed his actions, she also looked back and forth between them. The expression on her face instantly froze, and some improper thoughts suddenly popped up in her mind. Is this really fate? Crocodile Xuejuan and Lu Yanqing also found that their clothes were too appropriate, and they couldn't help but look at each other. At this moment, a huge electric net was suddenly thrown out of the dark clouds. In an instant, the 6 wyverns that were slightly stiff in the air were all caught in one net. At the same time, they were firmly trapped in the electric net. The electric net was connected to thousands of electric currents hanging down from the dark clouds. Obviously, it was maintaining the strong binding force of the electric net on the wyverns. Everyone was shocked by the scene that appeared in the air. It was a little too spectacular. Could it be that the 7th move of Wang Qing's sword drawing style was broken just like that? The 6 wyverns struggled violently in the huge electric net. Thousands of electric currents hanging down from the dark clouds became thicker, and the entire huge electric net gradually became thicker. It seemed that the net was trying to trap the 6 wyverns. I didn't expect your sword to already have a sword spirit in it. No wonder you can gather such a strong sword essence and show off the power of your sword drawing style. When I use the power of thunder to destroy the sword spirit, let's see how powerful sect leader Wang Qing's sword drawing style is. There was a sonorous snort in the air that overshadowed the thunder. The sect leader of Mythical Fire Palace, Hujun, suddenly looked at Wang Qing nervously. In the air, Bai Changchun broke through the dark clouds. His whole body was covered with shining green and white electric currents. Thousands of strands of thunder and lightning hung down from the dark clouds and connected to his back. In his hand, he held a huge sword that was tens of meters long made of powerful electric currents. He directly shot it towards the 6 wyverns trapped in the electric net below. It was as if he was going to slay the dragons with the heavenly sword. Everyone who looked up to the sky sucked in a breath of cold air. They were all shocked. This Bai Changchun was too exaggerated. He actually used the thunderbolt as a sword to slay the dragons. It turned out that fighting could be done this way. Naturally, Wang Qing would not sit back and watch Bai Changchun destroy the sword spirit in his sword. He waved his blue robe and quickly activated the newly mastered sword technique. The 6 trapped wyverns suddenly charged in all directions. The entire electric net expanded rapidly. Bai Changchun, who was pulling the thunder and lightning down, waved the long sword in his hand. In the air, thousands of thunderbolts struck the bodies of the 6 trapped wyverns. The 6 wyverns trembled and were immediately pulled back by the electric net. Bai Changchun, who had already rushed above the electric net, raised the heavenly sword in his hand like a god. He aimed at one of the wyverns and was about to kill it without mercy. Umph! Wang Qing's cold snort was filled with anger. He made a sword gesture in the big sleeve of his blue robe, and the 6 flying dragons immediately showed their original forms. The 6 snow-blue long swords burst out with flowing light, and they all slipped out of the electric net in an instant. They flashed and flew around Wang Qing rapidly. Dang dang, 6 crisp sounds, and the 6 swords combined into one. The snow-blue giant sword was once again inserted in front of Wang Qing. Wang Qing's aura suddenly converged and condensed. Bai Changchun, who was holding the heavenly sword, was slightly startled. He felt that this restrained aura was a bit similar to the 6th style, sword drawing style. After pondering for a moment, he remembered that 6 hours had passed and immediately understood the reason. The thunder and lightning that filled the sky suddenly disappeared. Bai Changchun turned into a flowing light and suddenly disappeared into the dark clouds. A voice that was getting farther and farther away came from afar. Wang Qing. It's not that I can't defeat you, but I want to break your 6th style, sword drawing style. Otherwise, it will leave a shackle on my path of cultivation that will be difficult to break. Let's part ways for now. We'll meet again in the future. As the voice faded away, the dark clouds that had gathered in the sky also gradually dissipated. The sun had already set, and at this moment, it was a night sky that was filled with stars. The surging murderous aura in the surroundings had also disappeared. Wang Qing did not refute Bai Changchun's words. Instead, he stared at the 6-dragon blue sword in front of him for a long time. He was fully aware that his cultivation was slightly higher than Bai Changchun's, but far lower than Jin Tai and Bai Qi's. The reason why he could scare off the two was that he relied on the sword drawing style with the help of this divine sword. However, the level of one's cultivation was not the deciding factor in a fight. The key was whether one's methods could restrain one's opponent. Though his sword drawing style could restrain Jin Tai and Bai Qi, with Bai Changchun's endless methods, it was possible that Bai Changchun could defeat him as Bai Changchun said. The leaders of the various sects looked at Wang Qing speechlessly. Although it was a great battle and the entire celestial palace was destroyed, no one could tell who won and who lost. On the surface, it seemed that Wang Qing had won, but was he really the final winner? Bai Changchun had said before he fled that he could defeat Wang Qing. Based on that person's proud and aloof character, he would not boast about it. And the methods he used were indeed convincing. At the same time, Jin Tai and Bai Qi did not die. They just escaped. With the power of the Emperor of the Underworld in the Underworld and their high cultivation, it was entirely possible for them to make a comeback. Unless it was really as Wu Xiong had said before, that their father and aunt, whose authenticity was unknown, could conquer the Underworld royal palace. That meant that the Emperor of the Underworld, Bai Qi's power in the Underworld had been completely defeated. At that time, Bai Qi and Jin Tai would lose their great power, and there was Wang Qing here who could suppress the two of them. That would be the real time to determine the winner and loser. The sect masters were at a loss. If Wang Qing gave them orders, should they listen? If they didn't, Wang Qing would not be soft-hearted. Listen. What if Jin Tai regained his power in the celestial world? Yu Qianshou, who was in the distance, was filled with resentment. He did not expect that a dark horse like Wang Qing would appear in the end. His relationship with the Heartless Palace was too good. If the Heartless Palace gained power, they would definitely not forget him. And that Wu Xiong would not treat him well. What made Yu Qianshou the most speechless was still Bai Changchun. He had hoped that Bai Changchun would show off his invincible might and slaughter Wang Qing, but who would have thought that this old fellow had such a personality? Not only did he say that he had a way to defeat Wang Qing, but he actually threw up halfway through. He came and went as he pleased. The key was what he should do next. After some hesitation, a look of heartache flashed across Yu Qianshou's face. His eyes inadvertently fell on Lu Yanqing. In the end, he could not bear to see her suffer with Ji Wu and the others. After all, she was someone he brought from the human world. He frowned and whispered, "Shouldn't you go back with me?" Lu Yanqing glanced at Ji Wu and Yi Shuejuan. She knew that they would not have a good time in the future. If she followed them, she would become a burden to them. So she silently nodded to Yu Qianshou, agreeing to go back with him. Yu Qianshou grabbed her hand. He wanted to find a place to teleport away while Wang Qing and the others were still not paying attention to him. Unexpectedly, Yi Shuejuan reached out and grabbed his other hand as soon as he grabbed Lu Yanqing. "Old monster. What are you doing? Stop fooling around. Let's run for our lives." Yu Qianshou looked back at him in surprise. Yi Shuejuan held his hand tightly and did not let go. He said in a deep voice, "Do you think Ji Wu and I can escape? That's why. Let's take advantage of the fact that they haven't reacted yet and run as far as we can. Let go of her." Yu Qianshou lowered his voice and waved his hand. Ji Wu also looked at Yi Shuejuan with some confusion. Why was he still pestering Yu Qianshou at this time? Yi Shuejuan said with a ferocious face, "Yu Qianshou, with Ji Wu's cultivation she can't escape. What makes you think you can escape with Miss Lu? You scoundrel, what you said before about not being able to take us away must be a lie. I can let bygones be bygones, but now I only ask you one thing. Will you take us with you?" Chapter 1097. With my weak cultivation, I don't even have the qualifications to carry the Celestial Empress' shoes. How would I be able to bring the two of you along? Yu Qianshou bitterly smiled as if he was praising me. Ji Wu listened to Yi Shuejun's words and looked at Yu Qianshou thoughtfully. However, hearing Yi Shuejun's words, she was also a prideful person. She had never done such a thing before. She immediately said with a cold face, "Brother Yi, we will find a way to leave by ourselves. There is no need to beg others." Yu Qianshou nodded and shook his hand. Yi Shuejun tightened his grip and said, "Yu Qianshou, if you don't take us with you, don't even think about leaving." Then he looked at Wang Qing and the others threateningly, as if he would call for help at any time. "Old monster. You rely on women to carry you to the sky. How dare you threaten me? Are you tired of living?" Yu Qianshou raised his eyebrows and looked at Wang Qing. He sneered, "Shout as much as you want. Let's see if I am unlucky or you two are unlucky. I promise you two will die before me." Things had come to this point. He was not afraid of this kind of threat. In the past he was worried about the Immortal Palace. Now that the Immortal Emperor had run away and the Immortal Palace had collapsed, he had a grudge against the Heartless Palace. Even if he bowed his head and admitted his mistake, the Heartless Palace would not let him go. There was no need to pretend to be a coward. "Brother Yi, let's go," Ji Wu said with a gloomy face. She did not want to be bullied by this villain. "I am a useless person. It doesn't matter if I die, but sister, you Yi Shuejun stared at Yu Qianqiu and said sternly, "This person has ruined your reputation in the human world. When you were injured and unconscious, he took advantage of you. How can you let him escape easily after taking advantage of you?" As soon as these words came out, everyone was shocked at the same time. Lu Yanqing carefully peeked at Yu Qianqiu, as if she wanted to see if he was telling the truth. Ji Wu froze as if she had been struck by lightning. She looked at Yu Qianqiu with a trembling body and said, "What did you do to me?" Yu Qianqiu was speechless. He did not expect Yu Shuejun to bring up this matter. Yu Shuejun promised not to tell anyone about it. Although he knew that promises were the most unreliable thing, he always thought that Yu Shuejun would care about Ji Wu's reputation and would keep it to himself. Who knew? Yu Shuejun. In fact, Yu Shuejun did not want to do this, but the situation had reached this point. No matter how much Ji Wu valued her reputation, he could not be impulsive like her and watch her die. Now that there was no place for the two of them in the underworld and immortal underworld, their last hope could only be pinned on this elusive kid. In short, for Yi Shuejun, he owed Ji Wu too much. At this point, he had to save Ji Wu's life first. Based on his understanding of Yu Qianqiu after spending some time with him, this kid was basically evil. The only thing he could do to him was probably women. He did not bet wrong. The arrogant guy was pinched on the spot and he gave in immediately. Yu Qianqiu looked at Ji Wu with a smile and said, "Don't listen to the old monster. I dare not do anything to you. Don't you know your own body? It's too dangerous here. It's not the time to discuss these things. Let's find a way to leave here first. Old monster, come with me under the cover of the night." Ji Wu was muttering that her body had never been penetrated by a man. Who would have thought that Yu Qianqiu's attitude had changed so drastically? Her heart sank. Shuejun, on the other hand, was overjoyed. He grabbed Ji Wu, who was in a daze, and grabbed Yu Qianqiu with one hand. The few of them dashed towards the rocky valleys in the forest below. However, as soon as they moved, they immediately attracted the attention of others. Immediately, someone snorted coldly, "You guys still want to run? Yu Qianqiu, it's time for us to settle our scores." Wu Xiong led a few people to quickly chase after them. In the end, a group of people spread out a net and searched everywhere, but they did not find anyone. On the other side, Wang Qing had already put away the six-dragon snow-blue sword and rushed to the depths of the starry night sky. It seemed that he was going in the direction of the underworld. The leaders of the various sects looked at each other and knew that the real key battle to determine the outcome was probably still in the underworld. Then they all dispersed and quickly rushed back to their respective sects to make arrangements. In the past, even at night, the paradise wonderland was shining with colorful neon lights. It was a day without night. Now it was pitch black. When the tree falls, the monkeys scatter. Under the stars, the dilapidated and decadent immortal palace glowed with a dark yellow luster. It was no longer glorious. Everywhere, Wu Xiong's subordinates searched the entire paradise wonderland for the treasures left behind by the immortal palace. No one knew if this place could return to its former glory. In the underground base of the hero army of the realm of gods, Yi Shuejun and Lu Yanqing looked around. They did not understand where Yu Qianqiu had brought them. Ji Wu's expression was a little dull. Yu Qianqiu quickly said a few words to Zhang Peng, who had rushed over. He turned around and spread his hands. "Okay. You are safe for the time being. The people from the immortal and underworld should not be able to come here in a short time. Remember not to run around. Otherwise, don't blame me if you encounter trouble." "I knew you had a backup plan." Yi Shuejun clicked his tongue. His whole body seemed to relax. He looked around and asked, "What is this place?" "The realm of gods. The people in this area are all my people. Listen to their arrangements. I still have things to deal with now." Yu Qianqiu pointed to a few people and said to Zhang Peng, "I'll leave them to you." Zhang Peng had just received the order when Ji Wu suddenly let out an incomparably sharp scream that pierced everyone's eardrums. She suddenly grabbed Yu Qianqiu's chest with lightning speed and said in a stern voice, "What did you do to me?" Zhang Peng looked at his master weakly. Lu Yanqing looked at Yu Qianqiu with a strange expression. Yi Shuejun looked a little embarrassed. Yu Qianqiu held her hand and smiled awkwardly. "I really didn't do anything to you. I just hugged you to save you when you were unconscious. I really didn't do anything else. Let go. I have to hurry to save people or else it will be too late." Slap. Ji Wu suddenly slapped Yu Qianqiu. The slap was extremely loud and everyone present was stunned. Ji Wu grabbed him crazily and hissed, "I don't believe it." Slap. Slap. Yu Qianqiu was angry. He immediately retaliated with 2 slaps. Ji Wu staggered and covered her face. Yu Qianqiu pointed at her and said angrily, "Bitch! You are now a chicken in distress. Do you think you are the golden phoenix of the immortal palace? I'll tell you the truth. I touched your ass. No matter where on your body I touched you. I have already slept with you. Even if you take off your clothes, you are only 2 pieces of meat. Do you think you are a treasure? If it weren't for the fact that I have slept with you, you would still be trapped in the heaven and earth universe formation waiting to die. Bastard. How dare you slap me in the face, bitch?" Yu Qianqiu spouted a series of vicious words. He had no time to recall what happened in the past with her. He left the dumbfounded people and disappeared. In the hallucinatory Immortal City's World Chamber of Commerce, Yu Qianqiu directly appeared in the hall on the first floor. He waved to the people in the hall with a sullen face and said, "Everyone gather in the big conference room immediately. Hurry, hurry, hurry." After saying "hurry" 3 times, he turned into a stream of light and flew up the stairs. He shouted at everyone to gather quickly. Everyone hurriedly packed up the things that could be taken away. Before Yu Qianqiu went to the Immortal Palace, he had specially gathered everyone to make arrangements. If there was an accident, they would move together. It could be said that they had long been prepared. Now that he was in such a hurry, it was obvious that an accident had really happened. The atmosphere in the building immediately became tense. On the 22nd floor, Yu Qianqiu quickly knocked on the doors of the women and asked everyone to quickly gather in the big conference room downstairs. The women were first surprised by his gorgeous clothes, then they quickly packed up the things that could be taken away. Wei Chuanxiu quickly came over and was also stunned when she saw the golden robe on him. She then asked, "What happened?" Heartless Palace's sect master Wang Qing went crazy and defeated Jin Tai and Bai Qi. The immortal world is about to change. We must leave immediately. What? Wang Qing defeated Jin Tai and Bai Qi? Wei Chuanxiu was shocked and said, "When did Wang Qing become so powerful? How is De Mingluan?" De Mingluan is fine. He has already escaped to the netherworld with Jin Tai and Bai Qi. Quickly call Senior Yun to gather in the big conference room downstairs. As Yu Qianqiu spoke, he had already rushed to the door of the room where Bai Suzhen was cultivating. He directly pushed open the door, only to see Bai Suzhen, who was sitting cross-legged, slowly opening her beautiful eyes. Seeing him, she also couldn't help but look at the golden robe on his body. A faint smile appeared on her face and she said, "Why are you dressed like this?" Yu Qianqiu's anxious footsteps immediately slowed down. He lightly walked in front of her and stretched out his hand. "There's some trouble. It's not good to stay here anymore. We can talk about the details later. I will bring you to another place to continue cultivating." Bai Suzhen nodded her head. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't ask anything unnecessary. She believed that he would definitely tell her what he should tell her. She stretched out her hand and stood up. The two of them held hands and walked out. Coincidentally, they bumped into Wei Chuanxiu and Yun Peng, who were coming down from the rooftop. Yu Qianqiu said, "Let's go." The 4 of them quickly rushed downstairs. In the big conference room, everyone had already arrived before the 4 of them arrived. However, this was the first time everyone had seen Bai Suzhen. Seeing the luxuriously dressed Yu Qianqiu holding hands with her in public, the others were a little curious, while the expressions of the girls were a little unnatural. Now was not the time to explain too much. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and everyone disappeared. They appeared in the underground space of the Netherworld Palace in Utopia, which was a copy of the East Holy Land. Then their vision blurred and the scene changed again. They had already arrived at the underground base of the Divine Ruin Realm. This was the first time Wei Chuanxiu and Yun Peng had experienced such an incredible teleportation, and they couldn't help but look at each other. However, Yu Qianqiu waved his hand at Lu Yanqing, who was not far away, and said, "Tell everyone about the great changes that have happened in the Immortal Palace. Otherwise everyone will be confused." Chapter 1098. The lords of the various countries and Lu Yanqing were all old acquaintances, so they did not stand on ceremony. They surrounded her and asked what was going on, but Lu Yanqing was really not an expert at telling stories. She had told such a good topic like a piece of wood, but such a shocking change still caused everyone to boo again and again. Especially after hearing about Bai Changchun's feat, they were excited and emotional. There was also some pride in it. They all lamented that the #1 expert who once deterred the world was still as powerful as before in the immortal world. Back then he was looking down on the world, but now he was looking down on the 3 realms. The distance between them and Bai Changchun had not shortened. Instead, it was getting further apart. Among the crowd, the most melancholy was Nongzhu. Nongzhu's nostalgic expression was a little lost. Although she was Bai Changchun's good friend, she really could not catch up with Bai Changchun anymore. Could they still sit and chat like they used to on Obedient Island? Nongzhu smiled bitterly and shook her head. Yun Peng and Wei Chuanxiu, along with several women, were also listening to Lu Yanqing's story. Yu Qianqiu and Zhang Peng were constantly discussing the arrangements for these people, especially Bai Suzhen's cultivation place. Ji Wu, who almost overturned the entire underground base after Yu Qianqiu left, was finally persuaded by Yi Xuejuan. After learning the truth from Yi Xuejuan, and remembering that she was still a virgin, she believed Yu Qianqiu's words were said out of anger. However, after learning that Yu Qianqiu had spanked her, she gritted her teeth in shame and annoyance, but she did not lose her temper in public. However, when others learned that the woman in the golden phoenix robe was the wife left behind by immortal Emperor Jin Tai when he escaped, and looked at Yu Qianqiu's dragon robe, everyone felt that Yu Qianqiu had abducted Jin Tai's wife. After the discussion was over, Yu Qianqiu looked around and suddenly realized that something was missing. He walked to the side of the women and asked, "Where is that girl Luer?" The women looked at Wei Chuanxiu and said, "Her grandfather took her away." "So what if he's taken away? Why are you looking at him?" Yu Qianqiu stroked his chin and muttered to himself. Ziyi, who had changed to a new environment and had something to play with, excitedly came over and snitched on Yu Qianqiu. Luer's grandfather knows Bat King Wei. Bat King Wei seems to be quite afraid of Luer's grandfather. He doesn't even dare to raise his head after being scolded. On the other side, Wei Chuanxiu's face immediately darkened. "What a talkative girl, what are you talking about?" Ziyi stuck out her bright red tongue and shut up. Was there such a thing? Yu Qianqiu walked to Wei Chuanxiu's side with an annoyed expression and asked suspiciously, "Bat King Wei, what is going on?" Wei Chuanxiu shook her head at first and didn't want to say anything, but when she saw Bai Suzhen and Yun Peng looking at her curiously, she immediately said with a wry smile, "It's not good to let too many people know about this. Just the four of us, let's find a quiet place to talk slowly." "No problem. Follow me." Yu Qianqiu led the few of them into the depths of the underground base's passageways. They turned left and right and randomly found a secluded room. After they entered, they even laid down a soundproof barrier. In the room, Wei Chuanxiu's gaze swept across the few of them. After a moment of hesitation, she slowly said, "Actually, Luer's grandfather is the elder who told me about Zheng Yi and Ming's past." "It's him? That old man who sold snacks in the hallucinatory immortal city was actually the mysterious elder you spoke of?" Yu Qianqiu exclaimed in surprise and exchanged a glance with Yun Peng. Bai Suzhen was a little confused, but she liked peace and wasn't the kind of woman who would get to the bottom of things. "He sold snacks in the hallucinatory immortal city?" Wei Chuanxiu was startled and immediately said with some remorse and self-blame, "That's right. He should have changed his appearance and came out to travel. When he barged into the World Commerce Association to find Luer, I didn't recognize him. It was only when he warned me to warn you not to approach Luer in the future that I recognized him. So he had long been to the hallucinatory immortal city, but I didn't pay him a visit. It's really a sin." "Warn me? *CK. It was clearly his granddaughter who was pestering me, okay?" Yu Qianqiu sneered a few times. Then he changed the topic and said, "I say, Bat King Wei, just who is this old man? I see that you seem to take him seriously. Could he be very powerful? Even the demon god has to respectfully call him senior when he sees him. Do you think he's powerful or not?" Bat King Wei's gaze turned to Bai Suzhen and said with a solemn expression, "The reason why Su Zhen and I could have the opportunity to cultivate the 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra that Tai Shu Zheng left behind was because we met him by chance. He felt that we were fated, so he pointed out Tai Shu Zheng's secluded cultivation place to me. That was how I found the 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra that Tai Shu Zheng left behind." 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra? Yun Peng was startled, his pair of white eyebrows wrinkled as he said, "In that case, you went into hiding to cultivate because you obtained the 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra?" His tone seemed to be a little unhappy. "Don't misunderstand, I didn't mean to hide it from you. It's just that Senior Mu told me not to let others know about the 10,000 Demon Heart Sutra. I also know that this thing is very important, so naturally." Wei Chuanxiu gritted his teeth and pointed at Yu Qianqiu and said, "If I didn't meet this bastard, I wouldn't have broken my promise to Senior Mu." Yu Qianqiu didn't care about his words. Instead, he took a deep breath and said, "A person that even the demon god has to respect, doesn't that mean his cultivation is even higher than the demon gods?" I didn't think that there was such a powerful person in the immortal world. Why haven't I heard of him before? I wonder where I can find him. If I have the chance, I must pay a visit to such a person. Wei Chuanqiu muttered. It's not certain whether his cultivation is higher than the demon gods, but in terms of qualifications and experience, he is definitely stronger than the demon god. He has always stood aloof from worldly affairs, so it's not strange that you haven't heard of him. In fact, there aren't many people who know of his existence. As for you wanting to pay a visit to him, I'm afraid it won't be that easy. Back then, I accidentally entered his territory and saw him. Later, when I wanted to go back to the place I entered to pay a visit to him, I found that I couldn't find the way. Maybe I remembered the wrong place. According to what you said, it's very likely that the place he lives in is another world. You accidentally entered the passageway and then the passageway closed. Naturally, you can't find the way back in. With his current experience, Yu Qianqiu came to a very certain conclusion. He then asked, where was the place you first entered? The passageway in that place should open again. If there's a chance, I must go take a look. Wei Chuanqiu recalled and said hesitantly, I'm not sure whether it's another world or not, because when I entered, I didn't feel the transition of the passageway between the two worlds. Back then, I went to the ancient forest of the Wood Fairy province to look for something. In the end, I had a conflict with the tree spirits in the forest. At that time, I couldn't fight against the tree spirits and was chased everywhere. I accidentally entered another world and met Senior Mu by chance. That place is called Wood Killer Sea. There are all kinds of vibrant plants everywhere. It's really a relaxing place. It's the most suitable place to live in seclusion. The Wood Fairy province, one of the 13 great immortal provinces, and that ancient forest. Yu Qianqiu pondered and nodded slightly. He had heard of it before. It seemed that the immortal palace had always been in control of that area. Normally, they wouldn't let anyone disturb them. They said that they didn't invade the tree spirits there. Some people had long felt that it wasn't Jin Tai's style. However, most of the sects didn't have any interest in that place, so no one paid too much attention. Now, it seemed that there was something hidden there. Yu Qianqiu couldn't help but wonder if Jin Tai also knew that mysterious Senior Mu. Wood Killer Sea? Yu Qianqiu muttered softly, Bat King Wei, do you think that Senior Mu could be a tree spirit that has cultivated for many years? Otherwise, why would he live in a place with Mu in his name? And that environment, I'm afraid it's not a coincidence. Wei Chuanqiu immediately said disdainfully, according to what you said, that Jin Tai's surname is Jin, and he lives in a big golden palace. Doesn't that make him a gold demon? Senior Mu is definitely not a plant spirit or something like that. He seems to have cultivated some kind of wood elemental magic art. Jin Tai? Yu Qianqiu cried out in surprise. He was just wondering if Jin Tai was acquainted with Senior Mu when Wei Chuanqiu mentioned Jin Tai. After hearing Wei Chuanqiu's words, he immediately thought of something between the two. After combining the cause and effect, his mind spun a few times, and he said with some bewilderment, could it be that Senior Mu is a wood spirit? Wood spirit? What do you mean? Wei Chuanqiu asked in surprise. Yun Peng and Bai Sujin also looked at him in confusion. I can't explain it clearly. I'm just guessing. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and his eyes flickered. They waited for a while, but he still didn't come back to his senses. Yun Peng suddenly interrupted and asked, since someone from the Netherworld dares to attack the Dark Imperial Palace, they must have something to rely on. Will the Great Bright will be in danger if it follows Jin Tai and Bai Qi to the Netherworld? Yu Qianqiu raised his head slightly. This was really hard to say. It was probably going to be quite dangerous. If an expert like Jin Tai Bai Qi were to fight, it would be very difficult for someone with the cultivation of the Great Bright Wheel to block it. Wei Chuanqiu was also surprised when he heard this. He stared at Yu Qianqiu and said anxiously, why is the Great Bright Wheel still following Jin Tai? Jin Tai is not a good person. From the incident at the Immortal Palace, it can be seen that he doesn't treat his subordinates as human beings. He can send his subordinates to their deaths at any time. No, we can't let him follow Jin Tai anymore. Yu Qianqiu, send the two of us out now. We're going to the Netherworld to find him. Yun Peng also made a heavy end sound, expressing his agreement. Hearing the two of them say this, Yu Qianqiu blamed himself in his heart. Why didn't he notice the Great Bright Wheel's head at that time? Otherwise, he could have secretly sent a voice transmission to ask him to stay and follow him. He reckoned that the Great Bright Wheel saw that the situation wasn't clear yet and wanted to follow Jin Tai to take a look. However, once the Great Bright Wheel realized that the situation wasn't right, it would mean that Jin Tai and Bai Qi's forces had completely collapsed. At that time, it would be hard to say if the Great Bright Will could leave Jin Tai and the others. Even if he could leave as one of Jin Tai's 6 great commanders, the people from the Heartless Palace would definitely not let him go. At that time, the Immortal Realm and the Netherworld would definitely send people to hunt down the Great Bright Wheel. Thinking about how the Great Bright Wheel had helped him many times, he couldn't ignore this friendship. Otherwise he would lose his foundation as a human. He couldn't lose this little bit of conscience. Yu Qianzhou's face turned serious and said, "Leave this matter to me. Even if he overturns the Netherworld and turns it into a pot of porridge, Yu Qianzhou will definitely find a way to bring him back." Chapter 1099. You alone? Yun Peng was a little hesitant. It was not that he did not believe in Yu Qianzhou's determination, but Yu Qianzhou's cultivation was too worrying. Could he bring the great Ming Will back in such a chaotic situation? Wei Chuanxiu's words were much more direct. She said bluntly, "Can you do it with your little cultivation? Why don't you bring the 2 of us along? I'll go check out the situation first. If I need the 2 of you, I'll immediately call for your help. That's it." Yu Qianzhou waved his hand and said, "Zhang Peng is my disciple, a trustworthy person. He is in charge here. If there is anything you need, you can ask him for help. I will go to the underworld now." Before the 2 of them could say anything, he had already disappeared from where he stood. Wei Chuanxiu couldn't hear him even if he wanted to stomp his feet and curse. Yu Qianzhou appeared in the valley at the foot of the hallucinatory Immortal City's World Chamber of Commerce. There was no lack of broken rocks and broken beams in the surroundings. There were even trees that had been smashed to the side. Lifting his head to look at the mountain peak, he saw that the World Commerce Association, which had been in the limelight for a period of time in the illusory Immortal City, had already collapsed. At this moment, there was still a raging fire burning on the mountain peak. All that was left was a pile of rubble. The World Commerce Association had been destroyed. Who did it? Although Yu Qianzhou was filled with anger, there was no need to ask who did it. Who else could it be other than the Heartless Palace? This was to be expected. Even then, his expression was still slightly unsightly because the foundation he'd established in the immortal dimension with great difficulty had been destroyed just like that. The high spirits he'd once possessed when he occupied this mountain had completely vanished, so his mood naturally wasn't good. There was a gurgling stream by his feet, and there was a slightly deformed silver ball lying in the stream. This was also the reason why he had teleported here instead of appearing in the World Chamber of Commerce's room. Yu Qianzhou casually waved his hand, and the silver orb landed in his hand. He looked at it for a moment, then clenched it tightly in his palm. There were still sounds of intense fighting in the distance. He threw the deformed silver orb back into the stream and disappeared. When he appeared here again, he had already changed his clothes and put on Niu Yid's mask. He flashed and flew towards the direction of the battle. In the direction of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance, there were many people floating in the air to watch the show. Yu Qianzhou blended into the crowd and saw that the buildings of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance had already collapsed. A group of people were surrounding some golden-robed men, and the one leading them was someone from Heartless Palace. Fang Yi, the elder from Heartless Palace whom he had met before, was rampaging through the crowd and slaughtering. The sounds of battle were extremely intense. "My friend, what's going on?" Yu Qianzhou cupped his hands and asked the person beside him. The person being questioned had a relatively low cultivation base, an early-stage minor immortal. He turned around to look at Yu Qianzhou. Seeing that he couldn't see through his cultivation, his expression immediately became much more modest. He moved closer and pointed below, sending a voice transmission. "You should have just arrived at the illusory Immortal City and haven't received the news yet. I heard that the sect master of Heartless Palace, Wang Qing, personally came out and slaughtered everyone during Immortal Emperor Jin Tai's wedding celebration. Even the Immortal Emperor and Emperor of the Underworld were defeated by him. The 2 supremes of Immortal and Underworld have already fled, and the entire Immortal Palace has collapsed." See, Fang Yi, the consecrator of Heartless Palace, immediately gathered some sects to encircle and annihilate the remnants of the Immortal Palace. It's a pity that even we know the news, the people that the Immortal Palace sent to the Chamber of Commerce Alliance haven't received any news and are still fighting desperately here. How sad. Yu Qianzhou nodded and didn't say anything more. He turned around and looked at the mountain that was still emitting thick smoke. That person followed his gaze and raised his chin. That is the once glorious World Chamber of Commerce. Its sect master Yu Qianzhou had already formed a feud with Heartless Palace. I heard that this time, he even fawned on immortal Emperor Jin Tai's wedding celebration. Great. They were the first ones that Heartless Palace took care of. However, the people of World Chamber of Commerce are really well informed. When the people of Heartless Palace arrived, the place was already empty. Everyone ran away in advance. TSK. Running away without anyone noticing, it's really admirable. Yu Qianqiu looked at this chattering guy and didn't wait for him to finish. He already flew towards the Heartless Palace's branch in a flash. That person was startled and smacked his lips as if he hadn't had enough. Some of the disciples guarding the door of the Heartless Palace's branch suddenly saw a person land and immediately blocked the incoming person with vigilance. They shouted, "Who is it?" Yu Qianqiu glanced at these people and said indifferently, "I'm here to see if there's anything to buy." Those disciples looked at each other suspiciously. Right now, everyone couldn't wait to watch the show, and suddenly, a person suddenly came to buy something. It was a bit abrupt. One of them pushed his palm up and said, "Sorry. Heartless Palace is not doing any business today." "That's a pity?" Absorbing Star's great skill. Yu Qianqiu let out a cold shout and swung his palm to meet the crowd. More than a dozen white mists were sucked into his sleeves, and over 100 purple flame-flying swords immediately appeared around him. A pile of dried corpses scattered on the ground. Yu Qianqiu had already charged into the Heartless Palace's branch with the flying swords. Many people instantly dashed out and shouted angrily, "Who is it?" However, a group of densely packed purple flying swords rushed in and started a massacre. Shocked and angry shouts rang out, and there was no lack of miserable cries. Boom! A large area of the Heartless Palace's branch collapsed. Then, purple flames shot up into the sky and immediately shocked the people in the distance. Someone is attacking the Heartless Palace's branch? That purple flame is... For a moment, there was an uproar. Heartless Palace's consecrator, Fang Yi, left the battle and flashed into the sky. He flew towards the branch with a whoosh. As soon as he arrived, he saw that the purple flames suddenly disappeared. The entire Heartless Palace's branch in front of him had turned into ashes. In Utopia, Yu Qianqiu, who had vented the anger in his heart, finally felt better. He floated in the air and closed his eyes to search for the silver ball that he had thrown in the netherworld, preparing to go to the netherworld. Unexpectedly, he discovered dozens of silver balls rapidly moving towards the passageway between the immortal realm and the netherworld. Master is still in the immortal realm? Yu Qianqiu opened his eyes and was stunned. Then he came to a realization. There was a long distance between the Paradise Immortal Realm and the netherworld. Although the old man's cultivation was high, it was impossible for him to arrive in a flash. Although Yu Qianqiu had returned to settle many things, he did not spend too much time in Utopia. He then closed his eyes and sensed again. He discovered that the old man was almost at the passageway between the immortal realm and the netherworld. He happened to be near the entrance of the immortal realm and the netherworld. He had left a silver ball to locate him, so he immediately disappeared in the air to intercept him. However, Bai Changchun's flying speed was too fast. The moment Yu Qianqiu appeared in the valley outside the entrance, he saw a stream of light rushing into the entrance. He immediately shouted, "Master," but there was no response. He immediately flew towards the entrance, but he realized that none of the guards at the entrance had disappeared. They had either been killed or had escaped. However, this was not something he needed to worry about. When he arrived in front of the spinning black light in the cave, he realized that Bai Changchun was long gone. He shook his head and smiled bitterly before flashing into the black light. Once he stepped into the netherworld, he was shocked by the scene in front of him. There were broken limbs and corpses everywhere. There were huge pits everywhere, and the ancient inscription tablet was nowhere to be seen. It was obvious that a huge battle had happened here. "I wonder where the netherworld royal palace is?" Yu Qianqiu touched his chin and muttered for a while. He then wandered around but found that there was no living person around. It was difficult to find someone to ask for directions. Just as he flashed back to the entrance of the passageway, there was a soft sound in the cave. Yu Qianqiu suddenly looked back and saw a group of people jumping out of the spinning black light. He was shocked when he saw them. They were none other than the 7 people who escaped from the immortal palace led by Nie Shaoqian. The great Ming Luan was also among them. Why did they only... Yu Qianqiu secretly scolded himself for being stupid. Although these 7 people had escaped in front of the old man, they were not necessarily faster than the old man in terms of speed, so it was not surprising that they were overtaken by the old man. When Nie Shaoqian and the others came out, they were also shocked by the scene in front of them. There were corpses everywhere, but there was only one living person standing in front of them. Moreover, they could not see through his cultivation, which made them vigilant. They thought that Yu Qianqiu had killed so many people alone. Nie Xiaoqian asked in a deep voice, "Who are you?" Yu Qianqiu glanced at her and ignored her. Instead, he cupped his fists to the great Ming Luan and said, "May I ask if you are the great Ming Luan?" When they heard this, they all looked at the great Ming Luan. The great Ming Luan was confused and cupped his fists to return the greeting. "Yes, I am. What can I do for you?" "I'm looking for you." Yu Qianqiu laughed and said, "I am Wei Chuanqiu's good friend, Niu Yud. Wei Chuanqiu heard about the shocking change in the Immortal Palace and you came here. He was afraid that you would be lost, so he sent me a message to come find you. I didn't expect to meet you here." They looked at each other. The great Ming Luan's eyes flickered and said, "Niu Yud? Why have I never heard Wei Chuanqiu mention you?" He was not a fool. He would believe whatever others said, not to mention that they were in a critical period. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. He could only secretly transmit his voice. "It's me, Yu Qianqiu. I've disguised myself. Yun Peng and Wei Chuanqiu asked me to find you." On the surface, he smiled and pointed at the spinning black light. "Can we talk in private?" The great Ming Luan was stunned. He stared suspiciously at Yu Qianqiu's face and carefully examined it. This voice was really Yu Qianqiu's voice. However, with Yu Qianqiu's cultivation, how could he have arrived here before him? Seeing that the great Ming Luan did not believe him, Yu Qianqiu secretly transmitted his voice again.